Da-na, 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 da-na. All right, a little bit late. How are we doing, guys? Apologies. I hope everything's coming across okay. I'll just do a quick test, make sure it's all working. Oh, no. Not what I wanted to do. Where's, oh, shit. No. Ah, there we go. Right. There we go. Awesome. All right, cool. All coming through okay. How are we doing, guys? Hope we're all doing dabby dozy. Couple of things just to say, I think, before we get started. Obviously, happy Mother's Day to any mothers out there that happen to be watching this, and anybody who is going to be celebrating Mother's Day with their mothers tomorrow. Those whose mothers obviously may not be with us, right? Just hope everybody has a fantastic day tomorrow. That's the point that I am making. Just hope everyone is able to celebrate with the ones that, and this is obviously acknowledging that not everybody's family dynamic is exactly the same. People don't always have very good family dynamics, right? So I'm understanding it's not exactly going to be necessarily a happy day for everybody, but I'm hoping that we're all able to enjoy tomorrow with the women, the literal women that brought us into this world. Because there's someone who is not going to be able to celebrate that, given that it is the 22nd anniversary of one of Britain's worst crimes that it has seen, that many people sadly do not know, and I didn't know about until I started getting, for lack of a better term, political, and that is Chris Donald. Chris Donald. It's the 22nd. There we go. Yep. It's the 22nd anniversary of the murder, very, very evil murder, of an innocent 15-year-old white Scottish teenager who was kidnapped by a gang of Pakistanis in Glasgow in 2004, tortured and murdered for really no reason other than he was white. And it was part of seemingly ongoing racial tensions in the area at the time between rival gangs of Scots and Pakistanis. And his killer, who was serving 25 years, I'm just reading this from the underline of a BBC headline right now, in 2015 was serving a minimum of 25 years for murdering Chris Donald, and that he had been unlawfully kept in solitary. The leader of this gang, a guy by the name of Imran Shahid, has apparently won a human rights appeal back in 2015. We're apparently, worrying about the human rights of heinous gang murderers now. He had been kept in solitary confinement for a total of 14 months, and then a court ruled, the European Convention on Human Rights, no surprise, ruled that it was a violation of his human rights. And apparently he would not be eligible for damages. So you can imagine how much of an effect this would have had on Chris Donald's family at the time. His final moments, from what I understand, were ones filled with fear and just confusion, because he had nothing to do with the ongoing hostilities. These gangs of Pakistanis just went out and looked for anybody that they thought who was white. That was the criteria that was necessary to decide to go and kidnap and torture people, and anybody who looks like they may have been involved in the ongoing tensions. And to read you just from Wikipedia, for example, the kidnapping and murder. So this is why you might be seeing, if you're on X and whatever else, Ken Moore Street popping up a lot in the Pollock Shields area of Glasgow. March 15th, 2004, so 22 years tomorrow. He was kidnapped by a gang of 5 men associated with a local British Pakistani gang. Obviously, British Pakistani, complete misnomer, right? It's like saying Indian English, Indian English gang, right? Led by Imran Shahid, the kidnapping was ostensibly revenge for an attack on Shahid at a nightclub in Glasgow City the night before by a local white gang. And Donald was chosen as an example of a quote-unquote white boy from the McCulloch Street area, despite having no involvement in the nightclub attack or in any gang activity. Donald was taken on a 200-mile journey to Dundee and back while his kidnappers made phone calls looking for a house to take him to. Having no success, they returned to Glasgow and took him to the Clyde Walkway near Celtic Football Club's training ground. They held his arms and stabbed him multiple times. He sustained internal injuries to 3 arteries, one of his lungs, his liver and his kidney. He was then doused in petrol and set on fire as he bled to death. A 15-year-old boy. A 15-year-old boy, ladies and gentlemen. This is, see if I can just find a image of him. Just because he was white, just because he was viewed by these disgusting, people who never should have been here in the first place, hesitate even to call them people, really, who were involved in this seemingly gang dispute or whatever, right? Just because he was somebody that they looked at and thought that, oh, this looks like somebody whom would be involved. We'll just take him and kidnap him and torture him, right? This is, just bring this over to the middle. This is who on tomorrow, 22 years ago, was stabbed multiple times, set on fire as he bled to death. So please keep him, his family, and all of them really in your minds and in your hearts tomorrow. Please. We will remember, we will not forget, and we will look back in anger. We will look back in an unabating, unyielding, world-burning anger. Because Chris Donald is not the only one. Obviously, you only have to look at the rape of Britain, obviously. In all of these cases where there have been heinous, racially and or religiously motivated crimes against the British people, the ethnic British people, which have gone unanswered for generations. In fact, have been covered up, and anybody trying to get justice for them, they were deemed as racist and were viewed and to be treated the same way you would have treated heretics throughout history. So do not forget. Do not look back in anger. When you think you've finished looking back in anger enough, look back in anger some more. It's the problem of what's going on in Britain, and really the entire Western world, is not going to be solved by being nice. That's the reality. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. Standing with Scottish brothers and sisters, especially in this area, very likely still going to be feeling the wounds of this 22 years on. If we don't stand with our people, no one else is going to. No one else is going to. Now, the main thing we're going to be looking at today, because obviously this is inextricably tied in with many prominent issues in British and Western political discourse. And whilst I do this, I'm just going to quickly go plug my charger in. Obviously, guys, as well, hoping that you can hear me. Hear me okay? Oh, sorry. I'm hitting the microphone. There we go. Awesome. So, I can't remember exactly where I was, but this is inextricably tied in with immigration. It's been the number one topic, really, that you're not allowed to talk about. The effects on culture, especially the effects on via Islam and all of those things, inextricably come from immigration. Just the problem of demographic replacement as well. It's a problem in and of itself, right? And the fact of the matter is that if there's no English people in England, if there's no Welsh people in Wales, if there's no Scottish people in Scotland, if there's no Irish people in Ireland, those nations will cease to be. Those nations will cease to be. And it will be done, it would have been done via just not being willing to stand up for oneself and for one's people because of fear of labels. Won't be conquered with, bullets and bombs. Be conquered with population bombs and fear of being called not nice names or whatever. So be ashamed to get through 2 world wars, 2 brother wars. In many ways, many estimations could be seen as completely needless wars, at least from Britain's perspective. And be outdone by just refusing to populate and by a fear of standing up for oneself and being allowing ourselves to be trodden under the foot of democratic socialism and this government that is doing everything it can to tyrannize the native people, right? There was a debate that happened, as you can imagine. The mainstream media and news outlets are not too keen for these things to be brought to light. And this is actually a debate that was censored before by a news outlet called The Spectator in Britain. For whatever reason, they did not want this debate coming out. And it was between Connor Tomlinson, prominent, if you want to call him, he calls himself a reactionary Catholic Zoomer. That's what he calls himself. And he had a debate with Catherine Birbalsingh, the quote-unquote strictest headmistress in the UK, headmistress of the Michaela School, which is hailed as this kind of example of how integration and assimilation is this massive success. Andrew Gold said that it was a microcosm of what he wanted to see in Britain. As far as I'm aware, Michaela School is vastly dominated by ethnic minority pupils, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's, don't quote me on this. Last I checked, I think it was over 80%, I believe. And that pattern is rapidly now emerging all across all Western nations, really. There was a video I saw of a mother in Ireland, I believe it was, stating at this protest or whatever it was, that her child was the only Irish child, and I will have to quickly go and sort something a moment, ladies and gentlemen, in a class of 30 or so, and the rest were completely ethnic minority. If this continues, it's not going to end up well for us. We're not going to end up as a privileged minority with minority rights and diversity campaigns. It will rapidly be the end of the native peoples of these lands. We need to take that far more seriously than we are. My sincere apologies. Ladies and gentlemen, it took me a lot longer than I anticipated. So anyway, we got anybody in? Anybody in? Nope, nothing in the chat. In YouTube, nope. So anyway, like I said, debate between the quote-unquote strictest headmistress in the UK and Connor Tomlinson, popular political commentator. Seemingly started off relatively conservative, but has trended in recent times, much the same as many people, myself included, far more towards gravitating to a lot of the typical nationalist or ethno-nationalist talking points, right? Or arguments, I should say. So they're not just talking points like people regurgitate on top of on a talk show or whatever, like a media talking head or whatever. It's the whole thing is rooted essentially in the rights of Indigenous people, right? The whole campaign of nationalism or ethno-nationalism in this instance is rooted in a campaign of saving the native British people in Britain's case, but native populations in their native countries, right? And not having it overrun by bands and bands and bands of foreigners. I'm not doing anything suspect, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I just have a kind of protein shake here, and I am just shaking it. I'm not doing anything suspect like it looks, but again, clip this all you want. So anyway, the apologies if anybody happens to be watching this on locals. Probably won't exactly get much in terms of this now, because I think the streaming limit is about 30 minutes at the moment. They had a debate, and it was censored by the Spectator, seemingly for political reasons. And they done a rehash of this debate on Dan Wooton's show Outspoken recently, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So you have Catherine Birbalsingh, who I'm not exactly sure what her background is in terms of her ethnic background. I know one of her parents, I think, is Jamaican. I think the other one might be, Indian, if I'm not mistaken. Like the Singh surname, right? I can't remember exactly, right? But then I think she was born in New Zealand, and now she's been raised and working in Britain for most of her life, if I'm not mistaken. So that's where people are saying when they, often quite callously, it would seem, call her essentially a citizen of nowhere, right? It's because she doesn't have, from my understanding at least, a, rigid or distinct, as in like kind of like coming from a homogenous background herself, right? So has a mixed heritage and has really just grown up and worked in all different countries, not as part of her, for lack of a better term, native heritage. You have Connor Tomlinson, who's just English, right? And we're talking about immigration in Britain. Catherine finding herself opposed to a lot of the nationalists and quote-unquote ethno-nationalists, right? Often arguing with them on X and so on. And can often come across as quite arrogant again, like foreigners, let me tell you about your country and how it includes me, right? Which is why it gets a lot of people quite angry. Seems like a lot of them can't then understand why people are so angry, right? Especially when you're facing a demographic event horizon like the British people are. For whatever reason, Spectator, as I said, I've lost the word. Censored, didn't release this debate the first time around, so Dan Wooton hosted it, and we have it here to review now. So I'll let it start playing, and we'll see what happens. We'll just run a bit of commentary on it, and see what comes of it. I've seen quite a few people talking different things about this, right? So I just want to change the background image of this a moment. Just want to change that. There we go. That's a little bit better. So let's get straight. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. I wanted to do this. There we go. I just wanted to move myself in a little bit. Okay, let's get straight into it as well. One last thing, exclusive stream on Rumble that was streamed last night. A post show with my conversation with Kimberly Isherwood. Appreciate everybody for going and checking that out. And appreciate you, Neil. Maybe your name is out there, if I'm not mistaken. You go by your name on YouTube. I won't go any further than that. For becoming a member on Patreon. Greatly appreciate you, my friend, and hope you enjoy the members' content that is in there. Let me know what you think. Looking forward to hopefully seeing your comments underneath there. But thank you all so much. If you want to become a member of any of the areas, guys, like locals or Patreon or whatever, links are in my YouTube bio and down in the description. So let's just have a quick sound test, make sure it's working, which I think I forgot to change the thing over. I did. Okay, let's see how this goes.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wooton. This is a special edition of Outspoken, and you know it has been our week of the clash here on the show where we debate the biggest issues in the world. But today's episode is a little bit different. A conversation, not a clash, but one the MSM and specifically the Spectator didn't want you to see at all. We're joined by Britain's strictest headmistress from the famous Michaela School, Birbalsingh, and host of Tomlinson Talks on YouTube and Substack, Connor Tomlinson, as they're about to get into round 2 of a conversation that
they done him dirty with that trigonometry screen grab. You can see here, this photo is much better, much more flattering. Don't know why they seem to, maybe for comedic effect, they've chosen 2 really nice sort of photos of Catherine here, and then again trigonometry, seeing doing Connor a bit dirty with the thumbnail. I just want to pop out the chat a minute, guys, just so I can see it whilst I'm watching the video. So do bear with me 2 seconds. I just want to pop out the chat so I can continue to see it whilst I'm watching the video. Otherwise I actually can't see it. So I'll bring it back up on screen for you now. Hang on a minute. Why is this not working? Hang on. Okay, the audio's not working. Bear with a sec, guys. Right, why is this not working? Right, there we go. Oh. Okay, BRB, guys. Right, okay. I don't even know what the hell happened there. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Hopefully I'm still coming through. Hopefully this is all still working. I don't know what the hell happened there because it told me that OBS crashed. Right, okay. Right, okay. I seem to be back. I apologize about that, guys. It came up saying OBS crashed and it closed the friggin' thing. So I got to reset everything up again in a moment. So I apologize about that. It's a thing that happens when you go live, I suppose. For some reason, the audio wasn't coming through, and then it told me that OBS had crashed, so I don't know what the hell was going on. Or just because I wanted to pop the chat out so I could see it. God forbid, I want to be able to interact with people whilst I'm watching it, which I wouldn't be able to do otherwise without popping the chat out. Anyway, let's just get straight back into it. Let's see if it's working. Yeah.
Greatest Britain or Union Jackass this week because of the clash, but the Royal Uncancelled After Show continues as normal over on Substack at www.outspoken.live. So now, let's go. The whole point of the independent media is to deliver unfiltered conversations and analysis that you simply will not get from the crooked, corrupt, and censored MSM. And today is the perfect illustration of that. We are hosting the controversial conversation that the Spectator didn't want you to see. Indeed, they have gone to great lengths to hide the footage of a debate hosted by its editor, Michael Gove, and our 2 guests in the studio, Britain's strictest headmistress from the famous Michaela School, Birbalsingh, and...
He just reminds me, this Gove guy, I'm not familiar... Right, Bailey, stop. I'm not familiar with him whatsoever. Where's the actual thing? I'll put it on mute just to allow it play a moment. This guy, I don't know why, he puts me in the mind of an older Pete Buttigieg. Or Pete Buttigieg. You know, whatever you want to say his name is, right? That guy who had the fake plastic breast on with his gay partner, right? Because obviously he's gay and they had this adopted child or whatever. I can't remember if it's adopted or if it's by IVF. And they've got this simulated plastic breastfeeder on, right? Go look up, you know, the image of Pete Buttigieg. He's an American politician with the fucking plastic breast thing on. It's absolutely horrifying image. Not surprising then the guy who kind of puts me in the frame of mind of that same guy, just slightly older, wants to censor this conversation. Pete Buttigieg is a Democrat on the left, if heavily to the left, as you can imagine, for those wondering.
Studio, Britain's strictest headmistress from the famous Michaela School, Catherine Birbalsingh, and host of Tomlinson Talks on YouTube and Substack, Connor Tomlinson. After filming the debate on immigration, integration, and British identity in September last year, and promising Connor that it would be released uncensored, the Spectator's bosses reviewed the final footage and decided it would never be released at all. Well, you know, there's no censorship here at Outspoken, no spin and no bias either. So that is why today we are giving Catherine and Connor total freedom to have that very important conversation. So, will integration succeed? British historian Robert Toms seems to think so, as at a conference on how to save England last year, he said that the solution to immigration, integration and sectarian voting was to, quote, clone Catherine Birbalsingh, because if you've been to her Michaela School and have seen little girls with headscarves on reciting Kipling and singing the national anthem, you think that becoming English is possible if you want to do it. And if you're in...
The sad reality is they're still not English, though, are they? That's the sad reality. And no matter how much Kipling and whatever they recite, no matter how much they love Lord of the Rings or whatever, it's not going to change their physiology, their biology, right? You want to save England. Theoretically, the first part would be keeping it English, at least keeping it vastly majority English when it's teetering on the edge at the moment of minoritization of its native people, right? So you're not going to get around this without having the question of demographics and ethnicity and these kinds of things. Anybody who's trying to skirt that now, and the importance of ethnicity is just not approaching the question honestly, right? Also, the thing which, again, I just don't see people putting two and two together on is the notion that the Michaela School is a success, and I've no doubt that Catherine loves her students, loves her school, loves her job. No doubt about that whatsoever. Not saying anything about that. But she has the title of the UK's strictest headmistress for a reason. And then if you apply this to the country and you apply it to the political system, the necessary or the logical extension of that is going to be that you need the strictest, most overbearing government. And therefore you are making the case for totalitarianism if you say that the Michaela School is a microcosm or an example of the success of integration. Now, you can only have that when you have a really overbearingly strict headmistress, the strictest in the country, quote unquote. So for anybody who wants freedom for the native peoples, wants small government, wants, less government intrusion in certain parts of their lives, less regulation so that it would make them easier to run a business, put things in place to, have more things to save, to send their children later on to school, or to set up a kind of thing to help them buy their first house or whatever it might be, right? Without being taxed out the wazoo, not to mention the whole thing with regards to speech and freedoms of that nature and civil liberties. You cannot have that, therefore, a multicultural and by extension, a multi-ethnic society, at least to the extent that we have seen in Britain, England, right? And Chris Minns, I've cited it time and time again, literally said to the Australian press in a presser, right? I think it was either in the wake of Bondi or at some point just before Bondi, we don't have the same free speech laws that they have in the US because we're trying to hold together a multicultural society. So you cannot get around the whole problem of migration and the beneficiaries of a multicultural society still being here. And if you want to solve these problems, right, to the benefit of the native people, to the benefit of the English and the British, by having those people here, you're going to have these persistent problems. That's just the sad reality of it. And for me, at this moment in time, that's really where the debate ends. But who knows? Maybe there's going to be some interesting points brought up in a moment. Somebody citing Michaela School, right? And as far as I'm aware, it's very good in terms of its academic credentials and in terms of its exam results and in terms of those things, right? It gets that only by having the most overbearing, strict headmistress or headmaster at the top. If you apply that to government, you're literally making the case for Big Brother and the Orwellian boot of democratic socialism stamping on a human face forever, which is exactly what we don't want. And it's exactly as well when Catherine says about small c conservative values, whatever that means in theory, would be against that kind of tyranny.
Courage to do it, and if you're required to do it. But one person who disagrees with that philosophy is Connor Tomlinson, who wrote an article after the conference insisting that you can't make someone British and you can't learn an identity. He says this integration myth must end. Catherine then began to weigh in on the conversation on X, leading to this invitation for her and Connor to participate in the discussion moderated by Gove on the issue of multiculturalism and integration. Both parties said they enjoyed the conversation, and it was conducted with respect, we are told. But I think these few months on, it's even more important that the conversation censored and covered up by the Spectator is now seen by you. So thank you both for being here to recreate that discussion. But of course, it will be much more sound because Michael Gove is substituted with me today, right, which we both love. So Connor, I'll start with you. Why don't you think integration can succeed, and why do you take umbrage with the almost universally revered work of Catherine at the Michaela School?
Well, thank you very much for hosting us both, Dan. I must say I enjoy it.
Is it like deja vu?
Again, significantly more sound than the Unheard Studios. So I wanted to say first of all, and I said this in the previous discussion we had, that
yes, but we didn't get to hear that, so you're going to have to repeat yourself.
I do not take any umbrage with the exam results and the like that Catherine has been able to achieve, especially considering the disastrous education system that is only getting worse under Bridget Phillipson. So the debate itself is, or discussion or disagreement, is not necessarily about a philosophy of the education system. My contentions were threefold, and I think it's taken on renewed importance since we had our first discussion, because not only, as Kemi Badenoch said at ARC, that Catherine's work is her model for the muscular liberalism she would like to see become the driving philosophy of her Conservative Party, but because Suella Braverman, who...
Muscular liberalism, a phrase that just seems like two words that really don't belong together. You know what I mean? The whole thing of liberalism is live and let live, not strong-arming people, right? Not being, well, to the extent that liberalism is now contradicted seemingly itself, that it's gone all the way around, and almost like Ronald Reagan said, for all his faults, that he said fascism, but increasingly seeing that it's more and more along the communism side of things, that if fascism was ever to make its way to the US, it would be under the guise of liberalism. Right now, it's the liberals and whatever seemingly are exercising some kind of muscular liberalism by clamping down on everybody's civil freedoms, whether it's with a digital ID and vaccine passports and whatever else. It was the conservatives and the right that were opposed to those things, right? So it's weird. It's kind of, in theory, it kind of doesn't belong in the same sentence, I guess. But now we're seeing that when you do have the kind of state, even the liberal state, flexing its muscles, all of a sudden you end up with a system like a Mao's China, or I should say Xi Jinping's China. And... you know, modern day, well, if you could say modern day China is just the best example, really.
As she mentioned in her speech as Reform's new education spokesperson.
By the way, Community knows a lot of people are currently not talking about it too much, that China has recently announced that they're forcing, I believe it's the Uyghur population. They've been obviously waging a campaign of elimination against the Uyghurs for a long time now, systematic elimination of them, and now outright saying they're going to take over more of their areas and force them to, quote-unquote, assimilate with the Han population.
As I said, the Michaela School is her model for what she would like to see throughout education. And so it's pertinent, per that quote that you read out at the start, that political parties across Britain are looking to the Michaela School as a model not just for education, but hopefully for their education, assimilation and cultural cohesion strategy. And so my concerns were threefold. First, that the version of British identity that is put forward as being practiced desirably at Catherine's school is indistinguishable from liberal pluralism, which allows other identities and other faiths to proliferate underneath it like an umbrella. The second thing I said was, I am not confident it's going to work. For the precise reason, as Robert Toome said, if girls are reading Kipling and singing God Save the King, but they're still doing it in Muslim garb, that means that they have inherited a comprehensive worldview, Islam, from their parents, but you can substitute it in with plenty of other religions as well. And they may well be participating in the culture that I have inherited as an Englishman, but we don't know in which way they're going to do it, and we don't know if that is going to have a stronger hold on the way they see the world than their inherited culture, their inherited faith, their inherited family dynamics. And the final concern I had was, if it does work, then it generates a brand new governing class with an excellent education as provided by Catherine. That means that you then have a new generation of politicians of immigrant heritage who will then govern over an increasingly fractured society where we are approaching a state of being a minority. And we've already had that in Rishi Sunak and Priti Patel and Kemi Badenoch. And all of these people, Rishi Sunak included, has been upheld as an immigrant success story. Yet, what did he do when he was in government? He opened the doors to India. And so it shows that there are still these ethnic and cultural and religious loyalties that persist despite a good education, despite going through all of Britain's institutions and
Yeah, no surprise that somebody of that heritage would do things on behalf of his fellow countrymen, right? No surprise. There's no surprise. You find that the whole thing is designed for British people and native European peoples to not opt in their own interests, to not vote sectarianly in their own interests, while minority groups are encouraged to do it as a means of seizing power because of their oppressed status. Right? You're seeing that Marxist oppressor-oppressed dynamic constantly coming back in these interactions. There's a thing that I wanted to jump in and say there, based on something that Connor said. I'm just going to rewind it 2 seconds just to see if it jogs my memory. There was a point that jumped to the front of my head and then disappeared.
We had that in Rishi Sunak and Priti Patel and Kemi Badenoch. And all of these people, Rishi Sunak included, has been upheld as an immigrant success story. Yet, what did he do when he was in?
I remember when we're talking about immigrant success stories, particularly in the case of the Conservatives, a lot of the time, in this instance, Kemi Badenoch, obviously, heading up the Conservative Party currently. Rishi Sunak was the head of the Conservative Party, Conservative Prime Minister at one point in time. Right. The Conservative membership now has been passed by Restore, headed up by Rupert Lowe, about 4 weeks after Restore was announced as a formal political initiative. That should tell you how people are feeling with regards to the state of this, not only the Conservative Party, but the reason, again, it's taboo to say or whatever, the reason why so many people are going to be flocking to Restore is headed up by an Englishman. And obviously, the majority of people imagine are going to be flocking to Restore are going to be English. The majority of the problems that we see currently, where a lot of the debate is centered, is in England, right? Because they are far more progressed down this road than Wales or Scotland are. And in 4 weeks, because it's headed up by an Englishman, and it's at least making the statement that it's not just a passport, or it's not just values that make you British, right? Hinting at there is at least an acknowledgement and a humanization of native peoples of these isles, that in 4 weeks it has already passed Conservative Party membership. That was announced earlier on today. That speaks volumes about where a lot of the public are trending.
Government, he opened the doors to India. And so it shows that there are still these ethnic and cultural and religious loyalties that persist despite a good education, despite going through all of Britain's institutions and assimilating. So ultimately, I'm quite pessimistic.
Catherine, why is he wrong?
Okay, well, I've written down here just what my original problem with Connor was. I've just quoted you here from what you wrote about us. Which
I'm surprised it could fit on one sheet of A4, to be fair.
Yes,
people
it's true.
normally have more problems.
Well, no. Well, you said quite a lot in the 2 videos that you made on us, and then also in your Substack. You said what Birbalsingh and the Michaela School model represent is a replacement of Britain's traditional high trust, homogenous, self-governing, spontaneous order with an authoritarian headmistress state to make new tribal minorities and the besieged host majority play nice. So that, I suppose, sums up sort of what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think...
Yeah, the biggest grievance, right, or one of the biggest grievances, the native Brits are being forced to make multiculturalism work and this immigration system work, and they never wanted it, right? Never wanted it. It was something that somebody shared from the 60s earlier, polling data, I believe it was, during, I believe, a period of immigration restriction, and then even you had the Labour, you had Conservatives, you had Liberals, and I think then you had an all section. Nearly 9 out of 10 people that were polled said that, yes, restricting immigration was a good thing. And by the way, the highest percentage, I believe, was either in the Labour or Liberal Party. I think it was like 88% Conservative, 90% Labour, 91% Liberal, or something like that. Angloid on X shared it earlier. And I believe I've covered it on the show before as well, that bit of data. So, yeah, it's the whole thing where now you're at this point where it's generations of grievances because the British people have never wanted to make this work, right? They've been forced to. They've been under the boot of their government for generations, and they're sick and tired of it and want it to end, right? That's what this whole thing is about. Sad thing is the government has loaded people from all these different backgrounds into a gun and fired it in their backs, which is why it's such a messy situation. That's why there's going to be no nice way to really resolve this, and a lot of feelings are going to get hurt and all of these kinds of things. But the responsibility lies at the treasonous government, ultimately. They are the one that loaded these people into a gun and fired them into the backs of the British people time and time and time again. Anytime they wanted to change it, they either gaslit them or didn't give them the options that they wanted, you know, because ultimately it was all part of a concerted agenda.
You really know schools. I think that while you sort of say, yes, it's great that you've got these GCSE results, there's a reason why we've got the GCSE results that we've got and why other schools are faring so poorly. And I think this includes schools that are mainly white, schools that have lots of ethnic minorities. Kids are kids. And it doesn't matter what color they are and what religion they are and so on. They need structure and they need order. And I think you are unwittingly actually just very progressive and very much on the left in the way in which you describe what children need. The idea that children shouldn't require order and that you've got this idea that there's this spontaneous order that happens. If you put 2 toddlers in a room with a toy, when there's only one toy, it doesn't matter if the toddlers are black or white. They will hit each other in order to get the toy. And we as adults, you know, our school is very similar in terms of its approach to the parish schools of the 1800s. And this idea that I'm authoritarian rather than being in authority, the distinction is often misunderstood by those on the left, that they think that I'm this authoritarian. And actually what you're saying resembles precisely what the leftists are always accusing me of. And as you know, the leftists will accuse me. They'll say, how dare I even come and speak to you? And you know, they attack me for that. And despite me disagreeing with you, I'm going to come and talk to you because I don't agree with the left in refusing to talk to people. I think it's really important that we keep channels of communication open so that we can find where we disagree. And what I'm hoping to do today is to try and persuade you that children need order and structure and that they used to have it in this country. And that nowadays, I mean, let me just give you a few stats. In particular, stats in Scotland might be of interest to you because Scotland, of course, is 93% white. And so if you're going to say, well, actually, this is the problem with ethnics being in the country. Well, in Scotland, 1 in 4 of the violent incidents that are reported to the police happen between child and teacher, right? 1 in 4. It's a child attacking their teacher. 1 in 3 kids in Scotland leave primary school not having achieved the basics in maths or English. Across the UK,
Can I ask how really any of this is relevant to the debate topic at hand, which is immigration, integration, and assimilation. Those kinds of things. Because Connor, the biggest thing here that I'm noticing, Connor wasn't questioning the academic success of Michaela and those kinds of methods and anything like that. It was the notion that it represents how people are using it, a political system and a reality, and a demographic reality is included in that he would disagree with. And obviously in context of the native people rapidly approaching demographic minoritization. And that Michaela School represents an extreme... Oh, bless me. Oh, sorry, guys. An extreme, extension of the same ethnic replacement that we've been seeing. And ultimately, the point being is that this is not going to be a good thing. And the ethnic replacement of the native British people is not going to be a good thing. It's not going to spell very good things for the native British people who will grow up as a hated, who kids will grow up as a hated minority. They will be a hated minority. There'll be no diversity campaigns for them. The actual stats here that she's reading off, as far as I can see, right, are not exactly relevant to the actual discussion at hand. And I'm just getting the impression at the moment that this is essentially no insult to Catherine or anything like that, but because I think in the back of her head she might know that it's just a losing issue. She can't really argue this. There really is no debate to be had, right? She's thrown out all of these stats and whatever else about the schools, but the school is not so much the focus. It's what the school represents and the demographic and political reality that it represents, right? Seemingly trying to hold Connor here to things that he didn't say, using terms like, oh, this is what leftists accuse me of, but Connor, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been approaching this the same way that the leftists have. So again, it just seems like it's thrown out there as a distraction, almost. Pardon me. Rupert must be protected. Yes, absolutely, Ian. Absolutely, you must be. Pleasure to have you here, sir. Thank you for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. Hope we're doing well.
You need 20% to pass your maths GCSE. 1 in 3 kids don't manage that. You need about 20% to pass your science GCSE. 1 in 3 kids don't manage to reach that. So,
in fairness, I thought fucking 40% in uni was low. Didn't realize you need 20% to pass. Can you imagine that you need 1 in 5 questions right in order to pass a test? Can you imagine if that was on your driver's test or something like that? Oh yeah, you did 1 out of 5 things correctly. That means you're safe to go on the roads. Jesus Christ, is that how far we've fallen?
I'd say there's something bigger going on here. That you're sort of fixated on this whole ethnicity point, when in fact, we need to look at our schools and what our schools are doing. You name all of these politicians who are brown or black, but what about the white politicians? And why are you not questioning why all of these politicians, whatever color they are, react as they do, perhaps, and actually not the ones you've mentioned. I think those ones are very pro-patriotism.
For India.
But no, for this country. Michaela is a reaction not to ethnicity or multiculturalism. Michaela is a reaction to the failure of patriotism and the failure...
Based interruption. Has to be said. Very, very good.
...of culture in this country. And we are reestablishing an old-fashioned traditional culture that ought to be in all of our schools.
By the way, as we are to say this, by the way, there were Indians on St. Patrick's Day. There was video that broke on X in a St. Patrick's Day, quote unquote, parade with Indian flags. And as far as I'm aware, I didn't watch the video with any sound on it, probably dancing down the street to Indian music, right? Dressed in Indian garb for St. Patrick's Day, right? That's apparently your assimilation, your integration. Right. Come on.
Let me give you another stat. In 2008, 75% of teachers said that they have a duty to teach children that we should be ashamed of this country. That's 75% of teachers in 2008. In 2004, 80% of children felt that of young people felt that they could be proud of the country. 20 years later, in 2024, that number has been reduced to 40%. So we went from 80.
I wonder, A, what would have changed, but also this is a two-part problem that I can see. You see no end of videos of people that come from foreign descents saying, when it comes to Britain, it's not my country, I'm not going to go fight for it. That's a reality that many, many people are going to espouse and believe, not to mention the underlying grievances of things that have happened and that they've been taught, again, like she mentioned, like the vilification of the British Empire, all of these different things. And then that goes for both camps. That's both native Brits growing up in a system that tells them to hate their country, that they are evil for their skin color and all of these things. And then foreigners who have no real reason, because they have no connection to this land, to the soil, to the generations of Brits that have given their lives in wars and tilled the lands and whatever else, to actually feel good about it and want to uphold it and understand that sense of dominion, right? And stewardship over the land. So as a result, then they don't really care. And especially when you juxtapose that or throw in as well the education system that tells them, no, you are, this society discriminates you because of your race, but not against the actual people that it's discriminating against, the native Brits and white, right? No, telling the people whom we are bending over, or the state at least is bending over backwards to do everything for, right? That they are constantly being oppressed by the society. Of course they're going to, if they believe that, of course they're going to say that they hate it, right? This is to be expected with the systems that have been put in place.
To 40%. That's no wonder when 3/4 of the teaching population is trying to teach the children to be ashamed of their country. Those teachers are not brown and black. Those teachers are white. So what you should be asking.
As far as I'm aware, though, the majority of those teachers, if I'm not mistaken, are going to be female. This is another thing we need to discuss. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody who may be watching this in the chat or whatever can fact check me on that. It seems for the most part, it's going to be a lot of liberal female teachers that are going to be espousing this. And especially, I think a lot of the primary school, primary schooling, it's going to be dominated by females for the most part. So, maybe there's some questions to be had there as well.
Yourself is what is going on in our schools. Why is the country in such a position where it sort of hates itself? Because that's really important when it comes to cohesion and everyone being able to get on with each other.
I don't think it's really difficult. You have a population that's indoctrinated to hate its own country, and you also have the importation of generations of hostile foreigners who, either because of religion that they've inherited from their parents or whatever, or because the school system, as Catherine mentioned, when they come here, they're told that the society is oppressive and it's so racist and so evil, etc., that they're going to end up hating it and wanting it destroyed. So you have a two-pronged attack. You have the submission and the subjugation of the natives, and you have the emboldenment of people, or the turning people who might not have been hostile coming from other areas of the world before too hostile because of the education system and the way that it functions and the societal norms and the bent of our political leaders. So I don't necessarily think that's too difficult to understand. It's ultimately comes back to war of the establishment against the native people in both senses.
And I just don't think you look at these points and consider them, really.
Well, you haven't read my other work. Or, for example, I gave a speech at the Family Education Trust after you, but you weren't there. And I did actually cover those sorts of points. So I don't disagree. The reason I think it's farcical to say I am on the left is because I do not buy into the anthropology that liberalism shares with the same Marxists that have populated teaching unions and are out there marching.
I don't mean the liberals. I mean the leftist identitarians. That's who you have lots in common with.
They're the same group.
No, they're not.
Hang on. Because the fundamental premise of liberals and Marxists is that they all start from the original position of we are all the same. That there is one governing philosophy, one way of life, which is suitable for all human beings. And so if we just level all differences between all...
I think the distinction here as well that needs to be made, because I think that the leftist position, a lot of the time, the liberal position as well, is inherently atheistic. That I don't think Connor means this to say that the liberals believe that how many Christians, for example, or right-wingers would say that we're all equal, different, but equal in the eyes of the Creator, right? That's not the point that's being made here. That's not the liberal point. Essentially, we are all blank slates. There's no differences between us in any capacity, and that via programming and whatever else you can get certain outcomes and whatever. It's why then the liberal agenda leads straight into transgenderism, and that men can be women, women can be men. It's just blank slates that can be programmed, right? So I think that's the point that Connor is making here. There's not a case of many people would say with like Christianity, for example, where, you would say that every human, despite their differences and whatever else, despite the differences that make them come from these different groups, different populations, etc., that they are all equal in the eyes of the Creator. That does not mean that they are exactly the same and just like a factory line of, to-be programmed robots, essentially, which is essentially what the liberal worldview must demand. Imagine the Indians introducing Peter Carla in Paddy's Day. Well, it seems to be the case that is essentially kind of what happened. But this way, they were dressed in, as I mentioned, they were dressed in Indian garb, dancing to what I presume was Indian music, with massive Indian flags behind them for what was apparently a St. Patrick's Day procession. It's truly, truly embarrassing.
Human beings and deny all differences between all human beings, then we'll all live in John Lennon's Imagine. And the communists have a much more violent way of doing this.
John Lennon's Imagine, great example to again highlight the atheistic outlook of the liberals, is literally saying, could you imagine a world with no God? How great a world that would be.
Which we both oppose. But the liberals believe that if you construct a society from schools to the state in such a way that everyone has a shared pluralistic identity, that you base this identity on things like tolerance and free speech and the rule of law and playing cricket and other sorts of things that the Department of Education cooked up under our mutual friend Mr. Gove, then everyone can live alongside each other and sing Kumbaya. And so when I use the word authoritarian there in the quote that you read out, I didn't mean that authority is wrong. I'm a big believer in hierarchy. I mean, it would be a bit weird if, as a Catholic, I wasn't. What I was saying was a culture is enforced at Michaela, which has then been used as a prescription for the culture writ large to solve our problems of
Just bear with me 2 seconds, guys. I'm just going to go check something. I will be back now. As you can hear, my dog's barking in the background, so I will be back in just a moment. Okay, I appreciate you being with me, guys. Thank you ever so much. So yeah, nothing bad, nothing like that. Just somebody walking past outside, and my dog has to be the one to go out and say hello. In the annual cow dung fight, yeah, no, I was actually watching an interview with Tyler Oliveira just before we started this, and he highlighted something that was really important that I thought, something really, really shocking, which was that a campaign that was run in India called, I think it was run in India at one point, called Poo in the Loo, was a campaign that they took from Britain that was literally trying to incentivize them to go to the toilet in the toilet, right? Because India has a massive problem where they essentially just go to the toilet in the street, and that's why it's so unhygienic. And then they get a bunch of cow dung and fling it at each other in a, what's it called? I've forgotten the name of the festival, but yeah, so enriching. So I forgot where we were. I'm going to rewind it just about 30 seconds, just so I can familiarize myself with like the previous 30 seconds, and we'll go from there.
Under our mutual friend Mr. Gove, then everyone can live alongside each other and sing Kumbaya. And so when I used the word authoritarian there in the quote that you read out, I didn't mean that authority is wrong. I'm a big believer in hierarchy. I mean, it would be a bit weird if, as a Catholic, I wasn't. What I was saying was, a culture is enforced at Michaela, which has then...
Easy way to illustrate that, as a Catholic, presumably, a Roman Catholic in this instance, Pope, you have, cardinals, and then you have bishop, then you have priest and deacon and so on. And then obviously you have the clergy. It's a very hierarchical structure, right? Easy to see.
Been used as a prescription for the culture writ large to solve our problems of multicultural ethnic tensions. And that is a British identity that you rationally sign up to by singing the national anthem, learning a curriculum. And importantly, as I wrote in my piece and I said in my video, which you didn't quote, but that's fine, that's premised on making certain compromises that you said at ARC in 2023 need to be made in order to, quote, make multiculturalism work. And that includes enforcing the children to not eat any meat in case it offends Muslims or in case it offends Hindus, Sikh dietary requirements. It means that you had a lengthy lawsuit for which, again, you had my sympathies and you were on the right side of that, don't get me wrong, because Muslim students organically started praying in the playground. And so rather than saying Islam isn't welcome in our school, he said all religions aren't welcome in our school. Now, when Kimmy Badenoch says this is the muscular liberalism I would like to base the country on, no. We're a country...
I don't know about what Kemi says. I wouldn't call us a muscular liberalism. I'd call us that we're British, which is a very different thing from liberalism.
But Britain. Sorry, Dan, I don't want to interrupt.
If you were to adopt a child, you and your wife were to adopt.
So you're telling me in order to make this work, you need a kind of enforced secularism, right? That the only religion that can win out is no religion, right? And you need to enforce that with the strictest headmistress in the UK. Yeah, good luck making that work on a... We're seeing how well that experiment is literally being run right now with the secular state in Britain, right? With no ability to ground morality in anything, because morality has now just become completely subjective because that's part of secularism, right? You're seeing how their society straight away falls apart without the fact that you need the glue, which in this instance is, again, the strictest headmistress in the UK. So you need something else if you don't want the strictest, most Orwellian government to take over the UK.
A baby from Nigeria, let's say, and you were to bring up the baby in your household and send your child to a school that was patriotic and did teach all the sorts of things that we do at Michaela, and you and your wife were to be the way you are with your child and talk about the history of the country, the culture of the country. You would eat, I don't know, breakfast with baked beans and you would watch Mr. Bean and you would read Wordsworth and Shakespeare and you would go for drives in the rolling hills and there would be a love for England in your household. Are you telling me that child would not be brought up as a British child? Is that what you were saying?
No, they would be brought up as a British child,
and they would not be British.
But is that what
you were saying?
They would possess a British passport. They would be administratively British, but that does not mean that they are indistinguishable from people who have English, Scottish, Welsh, and Irish heritage. Which is what Robert Toombs had said.
So hang on.
Using your school as... Hang on, no.
That child, because that child is black, would not be just...
No, it's because that child is Nigerian. It's not because they're black.
But it's
That's
your
not the same
child.
thing.
You've brought up that child.
Yes, but that doesn't mean they suddenly become English.
Well, okay, so what is it that would be so different about that child? Let's say you have a biological child and then you have another child and you bring up both of them.
Because one has my heritage.
And that makes what difference in terms of the way in which the child behaves?
It doesn't make a difference in how they're treated. Allow me to...
The reality is one would be English, one wouldn't be. And that's just the reality of the situation. Right? That's just, again, you can bring them up in the same way with the same love and whatever else. It doesn't mean that they're going to become British, whatever. The British are a distinct ethnic group. So... Again, you can see where this is going to completely fall apart.
Explain. Just because you have a different heritage doesn't mean that we should treat one another with more or less moral consideration. Just like I'm not impolite to you, never have been, on or off camera.
No, I'm saying how they behave. How would they be any different?
Oh, one is more likely to have a frame of reference for the heroes that they are being taught to revere than another, because the other one, by dint of having different heritage, has an additional obstacle to overcome to consider themselves a part of our national family or even my own family.
It's your child.
Yes.
So I don't understand.
Okay. But the other point that I was making was that when Robert Toome...
Not necessarily, I'm thinking here, because if we're talking about, in this instance, one child being Nigerian, the other child being English, when Catherine is saying it would be your child, well, if you wanted to get really semantic in it could be the case of, no, the Tomlinsons in this instance would choose to adopt the child, presumably in this hypothetical scenario, wouldn't necessarily be theirs biologically, otherwise the child would be English, right? So you can see there when, again, that child, especially, as Connor is saying, he or she is going to have more roadblocks in the veneration of these figures that they really don't have a connection with via that lack of heritage, right? You see how that would make logical sense. That doesn't mean it's going to necessarily have any instant impacts on behavior or anything like that. You can see Catherine, because she realizes, I think, again, that this is a dead point, because the British people, right, people who fit into the native ethnic groups of Britain, a lot of them, not everyone, a lot of them are not so much concerned with assimilation and integration and values anymore, concerned with remaining a majority, concerned with being the biggest voice in the political system that is rapidly trying to vote them out on their behalf, right? So people don't so much care whether you're good, bad, behave well, don't behave well. That's a lesser concern than just, if this carries on, no matter how good people are, we're going to end up in the same place regardless, where we forfeit the only voice that we have. That doesn't matter whether... Think of a biggest army diplomacy is another way that I've seen this kind of idea put, that whoever has the bigger army, they say what they say goes, right? So whoever has the biggest voice, what they say goes. The thing is, the British people, despite being and having the theoretical biggest voice, their politicians have turned on them at every single turn. So as a result, their voice has been deprived, right? So you see here, she has to get away from the ethnic component and try and go back to this civic identity, because to tangle with this in acknowledging that there are a native British population, her entire case seemingly is going to fall apart.
Used your school as an example of how to overcome the barriers to integration. He said, you can learn to be English if you are required to do it, and indeed if you're encouraged to do it. Now, first of all, your school does not have Christianity as an aspect of it, which Britain does, right? Always has.
And it doesn't even have the paganism that would have taken root before, right? Because he said no religion can play a part. But again, you're seeing there the way Connor's describing it, the way that it's been characterized, it simply reduces Englishness in this instance to a civic identity that anybody can have. So as a result, actually being English doesn't matter at all if it's open to anybody. And your ethnicity, your bloodline, your heritage really doesn't matter. How far your roots go back in this land does not matter, right? It's open to anybody. That is the whole globalist thing. So when you're seeing here that this whole civic line, if you're going on this civic nationalist line, it all ends up in the same place. Is that anybody can be British or anybody can be English, and it's just outright not true. It's just outright not true. And you're seeing here now Connor's talking about the fact that Michaela School is another example, which is held up as this premier example of how this works. It doesn't have many of the traditions that also, from a cultural perspective, make England or Britain more like how it's been represented through history, right? The Christian traditions that then came after the initial pagan traditions, right? Michaela School has none of that, and it also doesn't have the majority of the native population to say them, well, it's British on account of the people who actually go there to study. We
wouldn't be in England without Christianity. It was named by the Venerable Bede. So to say that your school is British, well, that misses a fundamental aspect of the culture. But also, no, you cannot become English no more than a man who puts on a dress can become a woman.
Catherine, can I just ask you about that? Because I think it's interesting for people to know a little bit about your background, because a lot of people won't, because you have Jamaican mother, is that right? Indian father. Guyanese father.
Indian heritage.
Okay, Guyanese father with Indian heritage, and born in New Zealand, raised in Canada. And when did you move?
I came here at age 15.
At age 15. Do you feel with that mixed heritage that you are English? Is that what your identity is?
Well, it depends on what you like. I'm quite happy to just call myself British. I understand actually you guys saying, look, there is an English ethnicity. I get that.
She can't say English because literally none of her heritage is English, right? She can't say that. So again, it's kind of weird that Dan has kind of put this question to her. It's kind of like an impossible question to answer. And that's how she has no choice here, but to pivot back to the British, which can be passed off as more of like a civic identity, right? Where due to nationality, you can have this include Somalis and Pakistanis and anybody really that holds a British passport. Right, so that's why she's had to pivot back to this. She really had no choice to say then that she's English or whatever. It would have just killed her case right there.
And I have to say that when, growing up in the 80s, all black people in Britain, when we would have conversations, you'd say, oh, I met that English guy, and everybody knew you meant that white guy.
Yeah.
It was perfectly acceptable and normal to consider English to be white.
And not racist.
And it wasn't racist. It was fine. I do think that because things have got very heated these days in the country with regard to the race issue, and I do think that has to do with mass migration and the numbers, and I think that when demographic change is so...
Yeah, push people to the brink of ethnocide, push people to the brink of genocide, and that starts with becoming a minority, right? Yeah, don't be surprised when people start throwing the gloves off and start even just turning into people that they wouldn't even recognize if they were under the same situation, if they were under different circumstances, right? Yeah, don't be surprised if a dog put you back into a corner and you put with no way out, bites you for its survival, right? Bites you to try and escape. Don't be surprised if things then regular people start acting in different ways than they would otherwise because the circumstances have changed, and the circumstances are very mortal in this instance.
Is large and also so fast that is a problem for any country. So I understand that, and I think that unfortunately, because that happens, we then have created this situation where actually I think race relations have got much worse in this country than they were. As I say, in the 1980s, it's more just a sign of respect for the country. I don't have to go around saying, I'm English, I'm English, I'm English. I can say I'm British and recognize that there is an English ethnicity. However, I would insist that if you had two children, one you had adopted at birth, and she's black, and then you have another girl who's white, that they would be very much the same because you were bringing them up. Now, where I might...
Notice she has to say black there. She can't say from anywhere else where black people would be indigenous to, because then, again, they're indigenous to somewhere else, right? It's a thing where if you look at somebody and they have that component to them, it's not something that they should necessarily be, degraded for or anything like that, in my opinion, or viewed differently, viewed with less moral weight or anything like that. But it is a marker that they would not be of any of the native ethnicities in Britain, right? So notice there she had to go for the skin color label in this instance to try and frame the conversation in a certain way. And now Connor's probably going to have to do another re-clarification where she tried to do it before when she said about a kid being Nigerian, and then tried to bring it back to the race component. And then Connor said, well, no, not because he's black, because he's Nigerian, right? It's a case of the race would be a component of that. You can see how she's immediately trying to frame the conversation. It's very subtle. It's very, very subtle. But if you don't pick up on it, it can be very, very effective for then misrepresentation, in my opinion.
Understand what you're saying is, yes, but if parents have come from somewhere else, then they're not able to bring the child up in the same sort of way. And so that I can understand. There would be a difference. But you bringing up a child, I have to say, I don't believe skin color or ethnicity carries culture. I think culture is created in the environment in which you are brought up in.
By who?
By everybody. So it is simply not the case.
So that's the nature, not nurture argument.
Yeah. So it is simply not the case that only parents have influence on their...
No, I think there would be the nurture, not the nature argument. That nature would imply something that would be intrinsic to people, across different ethnic lines, that people would just behave differently or be differently just because it's in their nature as different types of people. It's more so saying here that nurture is what matters from Catherine's perspective. I don't know whether Dan maybe I'm getting the two terms confused as to what he means, right? The whole focus in many ways on the nationalist side of things has been more around the nature, the way it seems, and the thing where it doesn't matter necessarily how you behave. There's an indigenous people to Britain and they are being rapidly minoritized, and that is not good. And that how you nurture the people that are playing a part in that replacement, no matter how good or bad they are, it doesn't matter so much, because the end result is going to be the same.
Child. It is that your teachers have influence on you, your environment, your peers, the media, all of this has influence on your child.
And in the Michaela school, do you see any differences between children who are ethnically English and those who aren't?
No, I wouldn't. Over my years of
Important to point out, there's very, very few of them.
Working with children, no, I don't distinguish between children of different races and religions. And
he didn't ask that. He asked where there are differences, not whether you distinguish. Let me just rewind that to make sure I got that right. I can't but think that's just a little bit of a deflection again, because I don't think that was actually the question that was asked.
Nurture argument.
Yeah, so it is simply not the case that only parents have influence on their child. It is that your teachers have influence on you, your environment, your peers, the media, all of this has influence on your child.
And in the Michaela school, do you see any differences between children who are ethnically English and those who aren't?
So he's asking an objective question. Do you see any differences? I.e., not do you view any child differently in that regard. Objectively, do you see certain kids of certain backgrounds acting in certain ways and then other kids acting in others? Do you see, literally, as somebody observing these phenomenons in the natural world, so to speak, do you see any differences? I can't help but think this is a slight pivot on that question.
No, I wouldn't. Over my years of working with children, no, I don't distinguish between children of different races and religions. And you guys know that there are so many white people in England who think very differently to you. In fact, the vast majority of them think differently to you. And so you need to ask yourselves, well, why is that the case? Like, what I don't understand is why you all aren't actually saying, why is there not a Michaela in Blackpool? Why are you not thinking, wouldn't it be one?
Because that would represent, again, another microcosm of the very thing that people seek to prevent. At least many people who are now, you're seeing the restore memberships is where I'm thinking that I don't think Catherine's got a good read on this, the way the public sentiment is going. People are seeing what it represents. People see what Michaela represents. It represents the exact thing, the boot of an authoritarian leader cracking down and enforcing a very strict way of doing things, and enforcing as well the kind of environment that would be indicative of a horrendous level of demographic replacement, right? Given how many ethnic minority students attend Michaela School. Nothing against those students, nothing against those children, right? Nothing saying anything about their moral worth or anything like that. It's just a case of they would represent the exact problem that people are trying to draw attention to, that is the vast demographic changes of the native Britons. That's the reason why people aren't asking that. They actually, many people, because they don't want to be minoritized, don't want Michaela to be indicative of the rest of don't want Michaela to be a microcosm of the country as a whole. They actually want, near enough the exact opposite, aside from the academic success. Which, Michaela has done a tremendous job in facilitating.
Wonderful to have, while it's true that we are secular, I would argue that our values are very much based in the Christian heritage of this country.
And I feel we're getting away slightly from. So
I don't think a Christian heritage would encourage some of the things that you believe, actually.
Okay, well, given that you aren't a Christian and I am, that will, and I think this is part of the problem of why tensions are so bad. You saying that to me will take on the aspect of condescension. And I'm not saying I interpreted it that way, but it goes very much the same way for people who are of immigrant heritage, saying, let me explain to you how your culture and your identity actually includes me. And that is what is getting a lot of people's backs up. And this is why, I mean, I've never been impolite to you, but there is a discourse, especially since our debate, the previous one, where there is a lot of heated and inconsiderate rhetoric going from people who feel their backs are up against the wall demographically, culturally. They feel like they're losing possession of their country. And so they are being indiscriminately rude to people of other heritage who are actually on their side and say, oh, you're going back, just like the rest of them. Now, I'm not doing that. But the moment you start to say, you're not actually a Christian, or you're
I
not
didn't
actually...
say you weren't a Christian.
You were saying...
I'm just saying some of the things that you're saying are not very
which
Christian.
would say that, therefore, I am insufficiently living up to Christianity. It's the same as
I
people
didn't say
saying...
that. I'm saying some of the things you're saying I don't believe are Christian.
Okay.
Now, we
Yep.
can discuss that.
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're all about free speech. I should
Yeah,
be
no,
able to...
Matter necessarily whether you believe it is, it matters whether it is or not. Christianity provides an objective moral framework, right, with a figure of accountability, right? So it's not just a matter of whether Catherine in this instance feels as though Connor is living up to Christian teachings, Christian ethics. It matters that he is. This reminds me very much so of how I see a lot of people debating with Andrew Wilson on like the Whatever podcast. Andrew Wilson, a prominent Orthodox Christian commentator. And they'll say like, oh, you don't sound very Christian when you do all this, being like, and then he have to clap out, but I don't care. What the fuck do you know? Right? I think he said to Nala Ray, you know, I'm not taking advice from someone or I'm not taking criticism from someone or advice from someone who's had 50 dicks in their mouth. That's literally what he said. Right? It doesn't matter whether you feel or not that Connor or anybody else is living up to the values that they espouse. It matters quite literally whether they are or not.
We
saying
are.
things I think.
No, we
so,
are. I'm not saying you
so
can't
you
say
should
things.
not be so
I'm
offended
saying,
as to
I'm
not
not
discuss
offended.
the
I'm
matter
not
with
saying
me.
this. I'm not saying
What
you
do
can't
you
say
think
things
Connor
to
is
me.
saying that isn't Christian?
I think that Christianity, of all the religions, very much wants to hold a hand across the divide and very much help the others across that divide. And it isn't just about, I want to look after my own and that's it, which I think is what...
Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen a lot of people saying this when these debates come up with the ethno-nationalist Christians and stuff like that. Right? Saying the Bible literally uses the word ethnos, which means people, you know, the Greek word ethnos, which means people. Am I right in saying that? You know, ethnos, where we would derive, in theory then, if I'm not mistaken, terms like ethnicity from. So, again, I would be careful, seemingly here, Catherine, I would be careful where you're treading here.
One of the extraordinary things about Christianity. I was brought up in a Christian household, so I'm very familiar with Christianity. I went to church, you know, for many, many years. And as I say,
One thing I would say as well, I'd be especially careful just because many Christians, people who identify as Christians anyway, have a lot of gripes with Christian authorities who accuse like the Vatican, who's having these like LGBT representation and all of these things, and literally saying there was a guy walking through the Vatican one time with either Pope Francis or Pope Leo's blessing, a cross emblazoned with a rainbow, and with a backpack on saying, you know, F your God or something like that. It's very dire, and that's why it can be a case of here, not necessarily Catherine here speaking because she's trying to deliberately distort something here to give her the benefit of the doubt. It could be a case of maybe she's been potentially misled as well. It's what happens when you look back in history to the Great Schism and then the Reformation and all these things. Because it's so fractured, it's difficult to get to the truth, right? So, yeah, just be careful making these kinds of statements, obviously, in reference to this, because I just want to make sure that you get them right, obviously.
The values at Michaela are very much grounded in the heritage of our Christian culture here and resemble the parish schools
Sorry, just checking the chat a moment. Just been watching this. Connor is very patient. He is, in fairness, there's been a couple of times where I've seen that he wants to jump in, but he has been very, very patient, very, very cordial. There's one time when there seems to be like the odd remark or two where he seems to be like a little bit sassy, you know, but yeah, no, he's been really, really, you know, really, really patient. Like you see, we've been forced to think about it ethnically to survive. Yeah, absolutely. It's Morgoth, commentator online, said that, you know, it was fine when the demographic wasn't under a threat to say that these people are English or British or whatever as a polite lie. Again, the whole thing here, you're seeing how then even like the smallest lies can lead to really, really bad consequences depending on what it actually is. But yeah, exactly. We're talking about this time and time again. It's survival at this point. It's absolutely survival. Visitors had their opinion won't change now that they see where a weak the Western government have been told what they're to do. They jump all over weakness like hungry hyenas. Yeah. I can certainly see where you're coming from. A lot of people, a lot of the leftists as well, they just want to try and trip you up. And again, like waiting for you to hopefully take the bait or take the trap. And then they jump on you again, like hungry hyenas or like vultures circling, looking for a wounded animal. In fairness, one thing I will say, Catherine is obviously very articulate. I just think that she just really has no leg to stand on in this argument. That's the thing. The only thing she can do is really go back to British as a civic identity and not make any references towards indigeneity of Britons and whatever. She can't really make the claim really from a logical standpoint and still hold the views that she is holding rather from that standpoint, because she wouldn't fit into that indigenous category. Sorry guys, a lot of gas at the moment. But yeah, you're seeing here, it's exactly as you said, Bumsy Sock. We're thinking this way because we need to survive. I'm thinking this way, right? I'm seeing my community change more and more every single day. And I live in bumfuck nowhere in the Welsh Valleys. You know what I mean? It's not like I live in London or any of these big cities, but it is changing, and it's very, very scary. It's a very, very scary time, especially when you talk about it. There's a good chance you're going to end up with the police knocking at your door, being thrown in prison or whatever. It's an anarcho-tyrannical state
of the 1800s in Britain.
But it's still, I don't want to
Whereas
interrupt.
the spontaneous kind of thing that you talk about the spontaneous order,
I think Connor, I don't know how the rest of this debate goes. I think he's going to have to start being that little bit more assertive, not critiquing him or anything like that. But you could see here, he said sorry and he was going to get ready to say something. And because he seemed to take that moment to get his thoughts together, to maybe formulate how he's going to say something, that in that moment where there was that brief silence, Catherine jumped in again, right? Almost like kind of like a filibuster. I think I don't think Connor's going to appreciate that, because as people have observed, he's been very, very patient, very, very cordial, but obviously everybody has their limit.
Is the kind of thing that progressives push. I don't think it's true. I think that sort of thing needs to be taught.
If I can lay this out, because I have found it difficult to finish a sentence, I must say. First of all, no, I wouldn't say your school is particularly Christian when it enforces secularism. And other religions are not reconcilable with Christianity. The truth claims that they make are mutually incompatible. So in order to have British culture, it's not Islamic, it's not Hindu, it's not Sikh. And so we shouldn't be giving quarter, or at least equal consideration to that with the faith that built the country.
Thing, right, outside of St. Paul, and I'm not an expert in Christianity, obviously, or anything like that. I'm not a theologian, I'm not an apologetics guy. But, the whole thing where, like, how do you talk about all the different gods of, like, Hinduism and paganism? I think they classify them as demons, essentially, right? Think about it. Where is Ganesh, or where is it Vishnu? And even pagan gods necessarily, like Wooton and whatever else, where are they mentioned in the scriptures, right? So, yeah, we do have this, like, the whole thing where Christ, again, the passage that really encapsulates it in the scriptures, I think it's John 14, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's John 14:16, if I'm not mistaken. I am the way, the truth, the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. I might have the exact chapter and verse wrong there. I'm pretty sure it's John 14. But I might have the verse number wrong. It makes very exclusive claims, and that many of those claims are completely irreconcilable with other faiths. You have different branches of Christianity within it that may interpret things differently. You obviously have heresies and different things within that. So you have like Arian heresy and all of these other things, the Sedevacantists, etc. Orthodoxy versus Roman Catholicism. That's the big schism, right? You can have all these debates, but when it comes to then those other things like Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, all of these different things, you have things then that are fundamentally irreconcilable. Even if you're going to go from the cultural elements, right? What's your population where you are? I'm not 100% sure. In fact, I will. I'll Google it a bit quick. I think Connor was the teacher. The way he uses critical thinking. Yeah, absolutely. I'll just see if I can. Let's see if I can. Google it a bit quick. See what it comes up with. According to, this is just from Google, so take this with a grain of salt. According to the population of my constituency in 2021, which was the last census, and it marks a 4.2% decrease from 2011, the population of my constituency was about 66,900. It has the three major towns within it. It is actually the 21st out of 22 local authorities in Wales by population size, so it's the second smallest constituency. So obviously you'll be able to find out where that is. I've said where my constituency is on the record before multiple times, so I don't mind saying that. It's Gwent. That's my constituency in Wales, but I won't go any more specific than that for obvious reasons.
But getting away from Christianity, not wholesale, because it is important, but getting away from that, I wanted to make the point that yes, we should treat children with equal consideration because, in a very Christian fashion, we should treat all people with more consideration. But I am very pessimistic about the prospect of achieving integration with one generation, even at your excellent school, Catherine. And that is because you have got populations who think individually.
Notice there as well, which I don't think we're going to necessarily see going the other way, he was very complimentary in his, not even so much criticism there, but in his difference. He said, don't think we're going to see it in one generation from your excellent school. Because Catherine seemingly multiple times I was gone back to like the academics and made all those statements at the start about different stats and whatever else, right? He's saying Connor's not disputing that the school is very high quality in terms of its academic success. It's just that isn't going to be the be-all and end-all, right? Because of what the school represents, which would be the exact thing that people are rallying against on ethnic grounds, the replacement of the British people.
Individualistically, by a matter of lineage and custom and habit, versus populations that come from very clannish countries that have cousin marriage rates of upwards of 80%. You also have...
I mean, whether or not it can be successful, I don't know.
But that's...
Not only that, you then see that the actual democratic system, like we saw in Minnesota, I believe it was, Jacob Frey, who won his election, he's a Democrat in America, won his election against Omar Fateh, who is a Somali, person of Somali heritage, right, campaigning in Somalian. He won because he had the wherewithal to essentially campaign on Omar Fateh being of the wrong tribe of Somalis, with the majority of the Somalis that were in the area, and the Somalis put that difference in clannishness, right, that clan conflict, above their actual like ethnic bond, right? You're seeing how different societies are completely different from ours, right? And whether they are integratable or not, that a Western politician got his position because he campaigned to a foreign people who did not side with one of their own because of a different clan within the Somali population. And Jacob Frey exploited their clannish differences against them to win that election, right? In a way, if you think about it, with the kind of board map, if you will, the kind of circumstances that Jacob Frey was confronted with, it's kind of genius, right? For all the things I talk about, like leftist politicians, how stupid they are, etc. I don't believe they're necessarily stupid. I believe they're very calculated in what they're doing. I believe their ideas are stupid, but they are not stupid in what they are doing. And he won that election with a massively increasing Somali area, right? Because he pitted their clans against each other. You can't have a system in Western society based on that. Myth of equity. Yeah, exactly. Equity equalizes downwards is a phrase that I like to. You have the state and you have everybody below that. In the UK, you have slightly different offshoots because you have the Equality Act, which based on different characteristics creates more of these mini oppressor-oppressed dynamics, which is ultimately meant to ostracize and make the scapegoat for every ill in society, one person in particular, white men, often being white Christian men, because you have the religious component within the Equality Act as well. So yeah, absolutely well observed.
The important thing, and this is why people think, no, hang on.
You have to think about
And the other thing as well, you can't have, sorry, I know I'm pausing it a lot, can't have equity as well because people are just built differently. People have different strengths, weaknesses, attributes and whatever. Not everybody is completely, this is the myth of the liberal system, not everybody is just this blank slate that you can program in certain ways and whatever else. And it's those differences between people that actually make interactions with people and whatever else actually really interesting in certain contexts that don't involve the ethnocide of a native population.
I have to know. Let me finish 1 minute. Yeah,
you're going to put all of us on planes?
Hang on.
And send us home?
No. But people are telling you that because you're.
Look at this, straight away going to an emotional appeal. No evidence that Connor's actually ever said that, right? You do have figures on the right that are saying that, right? Quite literally in those terms, right? But I don't think Connor's ever said that. So again, it's just a complete, you could use the term straw man as an example here. Right? Whenever this conversation comes up, be like, oh, you're just going to chuck us on planes or whatever else. It's not necessarily Connor that's saying that. And again, you're seeing you interjecting again, and seemingly not giving Connor the chance to speak because of how well measured he is and how much grace he's giving, seemingly maybe trying to take advantage of that a little bit.
You're immediately talking past it. You're not addressing their concerns because you're going from, well, they're here now, so there's nothing we can do. So
no, that's not what I do. Actually, I spent my entire life doing something. Actually, I built something. I run something.
I know you've done something.
I actually do something in the country that makes the country a better place.
Hold on.
So, whereas I'm wondering what it is that you do. To be honest, I mean, look, you know, I have lots of respect for you, but
it doesn't feel like it at the moment. Actually,
but the fact is that we all have to think, how can we contribute to the country in such a way to make it better? I have spent close to 30 years transforming the lives of children.
But the thing is, what if the native people of Britain never wanted people of immigrant background, wherever they're from, regardless of racial element, wherever they're from, here in the numbers that they are, to contribute to their society? What if the indigenous Brits never wanted that and wanted it reversed? What if that's what they wanted? Obviously, the whole thing is with this now, you can't, from Catherine's perspective, it would be the case of whichever way then, if she had an opposition to that, it would be, if that's what the indigenous Brits wanted, she would be admitting that she's actually standing against them. So again, it's a case of you have to juxtapose this with the notion that throughout British history, a lot of the time, like we touched on with some of the stats earlier, people have not wanted immigration in the levels that it's been. And with the prospect of minoritization in the next generation or two, people not only want it stopped, they want it reversed, because they never, ever consented to it and never wanted it.
And transforming the education system in this country to make it better, not just in terms of the way...
Catherine at one point endorsed the current guy that is actually one of the heads of the education system in the UK as well. I can't remember his name, you know, that Muslim guy, the slightly older Muslim guy with the big long beard and whatever else. It seems to be one of the ones pushing through this whole thing with regards to the new Islamophobia definition, and that there's going to be things that can be deemed blasphemous against Islam in schools now, like pictures of Jesus and so on. She endorsed that guy, saying that he was a good fit. Questionable to say the least.
In which we all get on with each other, but also in terms of how you teach and exams and making children into better adults. Now, and I've been really successful at that. And yet you've spent a considerable amount of time attacking me and my school, the one headmistress who is out there fighting for Britain and for patriotism and for British history taught properly, for things like singing God Save the King and reciting Kipling. You denigrate that and sort of say, oh, how ridiculous.
The thing is, here, we can say that we appreciate it. The English can say that they appreciate it. Obviously, God Save the King doesn't hold anywhere near the same significance for me as it would for them. It's a case of you're saying God save the king just purely as almost like a token gesture because you're saying that you're a secular school. What God? What God are you talking about here?
Ridiculous reading Kipling. But the fact of the matter is that that's not happening anywhere else. And there's a reason why the various politicians who you haven't mentioned, who are actually white, who they think very differently to me. And they are the ones making decisions about the country that you don't like.
Yes.
And rather than try and think, well, what is going on here? Why are they doing that? I will tell you that that is because of what's going on in our schools and the way in which the country is refuses to sort of stand up for itself.
I have already addressed that.
Well, you're not addressing it now. And when you talk about me and talk about...
That's such a weird argument. Oh, I have already addressed that multiple times. Can we stay on topic? Well, you're not addressing it now. That's such a weird argument, right? It's not even an argument. It's just like entertain my point for one more minute just because I asked you to, because if we get onto the actual topic, seemingly I don't actually have an argument that's going to stack up to the realities of the situation. So I'm trying to keep it on these topics as much as possible to obfuscate from those things, to keep it off topic, seemingly quite deliberately in this instance. I know there's a few clips of this going around at the moment where essentially I think either at some point she admits that essentially the whole thing, completely falls apart, right? But I would be pushing for this a lot more. And maybe, Connor would, not saying he's done a bad job, because obviously I'm not going to critique anybody in that regard with their performance with these things, because the credit belongs to the man, or in this case the woman as well with Catherine, credit where credit's due, to the man or the woman in the arena, right? The Teddy Roosevelt speech. So with that in mind, maybe actually being, again, a little bit more thing, I think Connor's trying to keep that professionalism and not wanting to interrupt, not wanting to get a little bit, hands dirty, etc. I think maybe it'd be a little bit good. I think if you've had, 27 minutes of this debate, now 28 minutes, about 25 minutes or so with the actual start of the debate itself. And a long time seemingly for it to be kept off topic, and maybe Dan in this instance, I don't know if he's moderated a lot of debates or whatever, maybe he's thinking in the back of his mind, maybe he thinks this is relevant to the conversation or whatever. There needs to be somebody there, either Connor in this regard or Dan, literally wrestling this conversation back to the actual things at hand, which is integration, immigration and assimilation, right? Not the education system. There's a nose asking to be helped out. This is one bird that needs a helping hand. How can she teach patriotism if she's not patriotic to a/her country? Maybe she thinks she's patriotic to Britain, but again, not upholding a lot of its cultural traditions and not able to really acknowledge the reality that there's an indigenous population. She's just getting emotional because she feels attacked because Connor is essentially her grand idea. Because Connor is essentially her grand idea is pointless and a waste of time. Yeah, that's why I think she's trying to keep it in these weeds where it's not particularly relevant, because they know the substance of the conversation, I think, is only going to go one way. Pleasure to see you, Inquisitor. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you all so much for joining. Greatly appreciate you all being here.
Michaela, you don't address it at all.
Because they're demented communist liberals. And the reason I'm speaking about this is because...
But how did they become that way?
Yes, because the education is poor. I agree with you.
No, you can't just then run roughshod over that.
The reason I'm not running...
You can in a way, because the whole point they're mentioning the whole thing here with, yes, nobody's saying we don't have problems with our own politicians, right? And that, yes, the school system does need work. That is still a separate conversation to the whole thing with people from immigrant background and assimilation and integration, right? Our politicians of native background causing problems and being treasonous is one problem, right? Because they're acting in the interest, either of foreign interest or interest opposed to their people, the best interest of their people, right? That's one thing, yes, which needs to be addressed, and people consistently call for those politicians to either change track or be punished. That you see no end of calls from people like myself, calling for Nuremberg 2.0 for politicians that enable things like the Rape of Britain and stuff like that, right? I'm going to address that. Nobody's saying we're not going to address that. So it's not really a point that's relevant here. We're talking about assimilation and integration of people from other backgrounds, not seemingly assimilation and integration of people of our own background who are acting treasonous and scummy.
Roughshod. What I'm saying is, the reason I focused on this example is because this is an internal conversation on, let's say, the right or the patriotic side, as you've said, as to what kind of society do we want to build and how do we want to build it. And the fundamental thing you missed out when you said, demographic change disrupts societies because of scale and because of speed. The one thing you missed out there was permission. Who ever asked for it? Nobody ever asked. No.
That might be true, but the fact is,
on.
what? Look, you're
Hold
talking as
on.
if it's 1900 and
I'm
you're
not
this
talking as if
grand
it's 1900.
master of the universe. This is what you'd like things.
You know, the whole thing, this conversation a lot, it's a conversation that often comes up. It's a turn of phrase that I often use. Although my girlfriend often uses, really, is that when you're in a conversation with someone, either if like you're having an argument or a disagreement or whatever, and if you say da 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 da, but it, in some people's minds, a lot of people's minds, it's going to completely eradicate whatever the previous sentiment was. Think about it. Classic example. I'm sorry, but it completely, whatever you're going to say next is likely going to devalue the apology in and of itself, right? So you can see there, Connor brought up the whole thing with permission. The indigenous people did not want it. What about the whole thing with permission? Catherine went, that may be true. We may not have had permission, but again, the classic thing, Connor brought it up earlier in the conversation, in fairness, people of immigrant background, people of foreign background saying, let me explain my society to you and why it includes me. Do I need your permission to do so? No, I don't. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. And that is, right, when you boil it down to its simplest, when you lay it out like that, you can see how that would be indicative of a colonized mindset. Whether people realize it or not. Not saying that Catherine in this instance means to do that, right? But that is what the position is likely going to boil down to. Then you're going to say, there's the question of permission, but that's going to cause a lot of problems. Connor talked about getting people's backs up. That's going to get a lot of people's backs up. Because, you don't think you need our permission to do things? Again, think about it. Somebody that doesn't feel as though they need permission to do things in your home, you would be rightfully pissed off, wouldn't you? And you would want them to leave, right? If they came into your home. And even if they were just squatting, they weren't necessarily doing any harm. Maybe they even came in and done the dishes and cleaned the toilet and whatever else, right? I'm not saying that should be the way it is, but maybe they did, right? And they say, you had no permission to be here, though. Get out my house. Be like, yeah, that may be true, but, so that means I get to stay here. No. You can see how when you apply the different constructs, you can see how it's going to be absolutely absurd. It's going to be absolutely absurd. Dan's face. Go on, Connor. It's rolling up a smoke. I'll be chat proper now. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. I think I'm going to go refill myself in just a moment. But yeah, I'll just rewind that. That is very, very, telling. And I think Catherine, is not necessarily a bad person, right? I don't think she's necessarily a bad person. But this exchange here, if I just bring it back a little bit further, is quite a telling one.
As to what kind of society do we want to build and how do we want to build it? And the fundamental thing you missed out when you said demographic change disrupts societies because of scale and because of speed. The one thing you missed out there was permission. Who ever asked for it? Nobody ever asked. No.
That might be true, but the fact is,
on.
What? Look, you're
Hold
talking as
on.
if it's 1900 and
I'm
you're
not
this
talking as if
grand
it's 1900.
master of the universe. This is what you'd like things to
How
be.
about-
We are where we are. What are you going to do, Connor, to make the world a better place?
This is what I just said earlier. Is why people are angry at you and are being far more acerbic and vitriolic than I ever have been, is because I said earlier, you come across and say, well, it's happened now, so we've got to deal with it, right?
Yes.
That's exactly what you just said. This is what
Yeah.
people are angry about, right?
Yes, but
Deal with it. No, hang on.
what else are we going to do?
Now imagine if you said that about the British Empire in India or any other area. Oh, well, here now you just have to deal with it. It's the exact argument that the leftists make to have a grievance against the British Empire and stuff like that. But you're seeing here how Catherine, ostensibly a conservative figure, right, is seemingly making that exact argument. Oh, well, we're here now. You just have to make peace with it. And you see then why many people, understandably so, imagine somebody came into your house and just said, oh, well, I'm here now. You just have to make peace with it. let me stay, you can understand why people then get, their backs up, as Connor said, and maybe end up getting a little bit more forceful with their words. And if push really does come to shove, they're going to get more forceful in general, right? Which is nobody wants that. Or at least I think there's a segment of people that want that. I don't want that, But ultimately, you push people, people are going to react, right? People are going to react. Yes, because we have boundaries. Yeah, it's this is quite telling. I don't know if maybe Catherine doesn't realize what she actually said here. Right, which fair enough. You're in the hot seat. A lot of times you don't necessarily have what things may come out in a way that you don't mean for them to. Right, you can be gracious in that regard. It's very easy. Me sat here, pardon me, in my dining room commentating, to pick and all of these things, right? Very, very easy to do. So in that instance, when you're under pressure, when you've got this, verbal back and forth, when it's being recorded, right? And there's no take backs essentially, because you don't have control over the editing, right? You don't have any of these things, right? You, it can be difficult. It can be difficult. So, being that little bit gracious, I suppose, is something you can do. But again, the whole thing here of being like, oh, we're here now, you need to just make peace with it and accept it, being like, maybe not. I was redacted.
What are you doing to help the country? What are you building?
And seeing here, she cannot seemingly contend with the actual argument, and she won't even let him finish it, seemingly, or at least the point that he's making. It's, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Maybe it's from somebody from Catherine's perspective. Nobody actually asked her to do anything, essentially. Nobody asked anybody of the masses of immigrants that have come here to do anything, because nobody voted en masse for them to come here. So it's telling to say, again, Connor could very easily say, well, the demographic problem or the demographic crisis is a massive problem. What are you doing to solve that? And obviously she's doing anything, because I don't think she believes that it's actually a problem. Why would she? Right?
Are you running? When I listen to Steve Laws talking to Andrew Gold.
Yes.
And Andrew
I don't have
Gold,
Steve
whose
Law's
family
position.
has been here since before the 1900s. And he's saying he's going to send him to Israel. In what way is this helpful to anyone?
No, I agree. I don't have Steve Law's position.
Okay, so what is your position?
My position is we create a sufficiently impermissive cultural environment so that
really should, I think, again, you could give a bit of benefit of the doubt here, or give a bit of grace, saying that you can say that it's hard to do it when you're in the hot seat. Really, I think that's one of the first things that you ask if you're not sure. She's brought up, you sound like the leftists, you sound like Steve Laws. Only now, more than half an hour into this video, she's actually asked Connor what his position is. If you want to have a true discussion about things, surely that's one of the first things you ask. What is your position, so that I can actually critique it? That's why I think in many instances, Catherine has said a bunch of things here that's almost like her just saying things and verbally punching it at a straw man again, because she hasn't actually asked Connor what his actual position is. And I get it, somebody in her position getting a lot of, abuse, if you want to call it that, via the comments online and stuff like that. As par for the course with being online, absolutely. Sometimes people can say absolutely awful things, right? One example for me personally is I see personally a lot of horrible things, either by bot accounts or people seemingly with nothing better to do, being said about and to Comrade, one of the survivors of the rape gangs. I understand that she has a bit of a personality herself. She'll get into spats online and all of these things, but a lot of people, they say just really, really cruel things, right? Not things to necessarily, I get that's what social media creates, not necessarily things that are meant to provide insight on a political topic or things like that, just to cause hurt to someone. I understand that Catherine obviously gets a lot of that, and maybe things that even people are saying that are quite logical and whatever, she might take personally and get hurt or offended by it and whatever. I understand that. But surely in this instance, when you're talking to Connor, you ask him what his position is, surely. She just assumed she was being attacked. Yeah, absolutely. What she's doing is good, but it's not enough. School doesn't have as much influence over kids as their friends or parents do. Yeah, for sure. Something that came up in my conversation with Kimberly Isherwood is that a lot of kids believe what their teachers tell them. But again, if they go home and their parents are telling them something completely different, right, there's going to be that additional familial connection, especially with religious families like Muslim families and stuff like that. There's going to be far more importance and weight put on those things, especially because if they don't, especially if they're like a young girl in those scenarios, right, the punishments and the views are a lot different. There's going to be a lot more potentially bad things that can happen, I would imagine. I'm speculating there. But again, you're seeing there that they view their community as something very, very important, right? And they will be more loyal to that community, the Ummah, than the school system or the wider society at large. So that's one example of many. Stan says, it's okay as long as they sing God Save the King and read Rudyard Kipling. Yeah, exactly. But you can read Rudyard Kipling and sing God Save the King till the cows come home, right? Doesn't make you English. It doesn't make you English if you're not English. That's something you have no control over. You're either born with, you're either born with it or you aren't, So it's just one of those things where a lot of people now, they are caught in a very, very bad position. I think you can have empathy for those people, right? While still acknowledging that it doesn't necessarily change the solutions, right? It doesn't necessarily change the solutions to these problems. Yeah, she does. I had a weird thing with her. I was kind of shocked. This is the first time I've ever seen her talk at length. I know she's been on Jordan B. Peterson before and stuff like that, so I never really watched her before, though. Yeah, she does. She did have an American twinge to her accent. Maybe that was from her time in Canada, maybe. But again, she's been here, I think she said that she'd been here since like the late 80s, early 90s, I think she said she'd been here from, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. On that. I'll just double check a bit quick when she was born. Let me have a look. Yeah, so she was born in New Zealand in 1973. And I think she said she moved to Britain in 1989, if I'm not mistaken. So again, I think she's just got those twinges to her accent, maybe from the time that she was in New Zealand and Canada, maybe. Or I don't know, but yeah, she does have a definite accent. You're completely right.
People who do fit in can stay. Organically, that will be a very small number of people. The rest can leave.
So who fits in?
People who recognise that the English, the Scottish, the Welsh and Irish should possess their own country.
Sorry guys, I got some, it might either be good news or bad news depending on where you're from and depending how much you care about rugby. With the state of Welsh rugby at the moment, I really, really, really do not care about it. But it may be good, maybe bad. France lost to England 48-46, if anyone was wondering. Sorry if anybody was going to watch it and spoil it. I should have probably a spoiler warning before. But final whistle, France 48, England 46. Heartbreaking defeat for the English.
Have interpersonally good relationships with them, so they're not living in sequestered ethnic sectarian clans like we just saw in the Gorton and Denton by-election, and who, yes, defer to the Christian heritage of the country, do not seek to make special accommodations for their own cultures and their own faiths. There you go.
Okay, so would you then raise all the mosques and the temples to the ground? I mean,
I don't know whether you mentioned then again people advocating based along ethnic lines as well. You would also have to include in that people advocating, for their own distinct ethnic groups above anyone else as well. Faith and things like that are inextricably tied in there. Just as I was reading that, I want to quickly go back and just listen to that. I think that was actually a good question by Catherine, in fairness, asking like who are the people that in theory then would get to stay.
So that people who do fit in can stay. Organically, that will be a very small number of people. The rest can leave.
So who fits in?
People who recognise that the...
Just before he says it, it has to be as well. This is the thing. It has to be a small number of people. It's because the larger the larger the share of that other set of the population grows, the more they are going to be able to advocate for those things that Connor's going to mention in a moment. So in order to keep the balance, it has to be small, right? It's not just a case of you want it to be small for some arbitrary reason of racism or against certain religions or whatever. it has to be kept small. Because the minute it proliferates and gets too large, you have then the whole thing where you have enclaves of people that say don't have to learn the language because they go into a place and they don't need to learn the language because everyone is already speaking that language anyway, because it's essentially a mini separate state because of how large it has gotten. So in theory, then it would have to be the case of it has to be kept small in overall magnitude and spread out across the land, if that was the way that it was going to be implemented. We smashed Italy 31-17. Wow, we got a win. Jesus Christ. Wow, I don't know, all burst out into the national anthem together in a moment, because Jesus Christ. Right, I'll never forget. I went up to Scotland one time to watch a Wales v Scotland game, and watching the rugby in Murrayfield is a hell of an experience. If anybody gets a chance to go and do it, go and do it. It's a hell of an experience. The person who plays the bagpipes on the roof was literally, we were sat and I'm facing forward, and literally on the stand up and to the right on our side of the stadium was where the person was playing the bagpipe. It was really cool being like that close to the person playing the bagpipes. Really, really cool. Oh, that's good. That's good. At the very least. Trap, she thinks he'll say not black people or something. Yeah, I think that's where Connor's again a little bit more savvy, maybe. I think she did intend potentially to lay a trap here, as we'll get into the thing where she said that, oh, you're going to start raising mosques and synagogues to the ground or whatever.
The English, the Scottish, the Welsh and Irish should possess their own country. They have interpersonally good relationships with them, so they're not living in sequestered ethnic sectarian clans like we just saw in the Gorton and Denton by-election. And who, yes, defer to the Christian heritage of the country, do not seek to make special accommodations for their own cultures and their own faiths. There you go.
Okay, so would you then raise all the mosques and the temples to the ground? I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
No, I don't think we should have them in the country, yes.
Right, so you would knock down all the temples and the mosques. Would you deny everyone the right to wear whatever dress they might want to wear?
I would ban face. I think it should be encouraged. I'm sure you agree that the tracksuit trend among white British people is not very noble. But I would ban face-veiling practices like the niqab and burqa, obviously.
Okay, but other ways of dress you would allow? Is it just the burqa that you...
I suppose one would...
And that's just because, again, they're national security concerns as well. You see no end of men veiling themselves if they need to avoid scrutiny for some reason, right? There was a guy that was walking around somewhere in England that was caught on video because someone pulled the thing off and he was wearing the niqab or the burqa, whatever it was. Apparently it was one of the Iranian generals that was trying to escape Iran, and you saw him walking out with like the full dress on, and he was identified by like the shoes that he was wearing or something like that, and he had the woman right next to him. So yeah, these things, they're national security issues, right? And that could extend to things like balaclavas and to a lesser extent, right, the face coverings that just come up to here but, you know, leave everything else out. They don't cover like your hair and anything else, right, like we were wearing during COVID. Obviously, sometimes as well, you can maybe understand, right? Because in theory, then you have to then start getting specific. Because in theory, scarves would fall into that category as well if somebody pulls them up over their face when it's cold outside, right? So there has to be some element here of acknowledging why people are wearing those things, and then seeing where it goes down and becomes a national security threat. Because you never had issues of worrying about if a woman walking in the street with a scarf on a cold day is going to all of a sudden shout Allahu Akbar and blow herself up, right? Is it turn them into pubs? Yes, completely agree. I think maybe they be raised, and I see them doing it with churches at the moment, but they don't actually change the structure of the thing, right? Which could be seen as very, very sacrilegious, right? It does create a hell of a good like visual, in my opinion, right? When they put the gym inside of a defunct church, right? When they put a gym inside of a defunct church, but again, very, very sacred, hallowed ground, shouldn't be done. I get that. It does create a really cool aesthetic, but maybe some of them could be turned into gyms as well. Convert them back into pubs, yeah. Or some of them as well, convert them back into churches and try and incentivize people to get to use them as well, maybe. Shoplift using that long dress thing as a cover to not all but obviously. Yeah, exactly. It's convenient for them. Yeah, exactly. Completely right.
One would have to. But it would be the case that in our public life, other faiths and other cultures would not get a hearing. And then organically, if people feel that they do not fit in there, that their dietary requirements...
Not get a hearing, what do you mean?
They don't get political representation, they don't get funding from the state, they don't get constant promotion on broadcast networks. And, you don't get to should Luton look like Luton? That's the fundamental question. Should Birmingham look like Birmingham? Should Bradford look like Bradford? Should they be recreations of Pakistan and India? Should there be little colonies of immigrant heritage populated?
Also, not slaughtering our animals in any religious practices that the majority of British people are not on board with, like halal and kosher. Obviously, barbaric slaughter practices that don't go along with like the stun requirements and stuff like that comes with the slaughter practices in civilized Britain, right? Those things as well, you know, cultural customs and religious norms of things like that. Especially when the government seems to get very sneaky, then try to not label things and try to make people eat halal products without knowing, which can put people, you know, like Christians, as far as I'm aware, in serious turmoil with their faith. And I believe could be seen as gravely sinful because it's adopting another religious practice that's not part of the faith. So again, the government doing that deliberately to try and normalize hostile agendas to Britain is especially treasonous. You know what I mean? I'm just reading your comments moment. Connor having to defend his heritage. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. You have people now having to defend their heritage and defend the heritage of the people, the indigenous peoples of these isles. And that's an example here that this whole... People say that it's been colonized, right? This debate having to be had is a prime example of it. When Labour wanted lighter sentences for women, disabled people and minorities. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, what I'll do is, guys, I just got to pop off for a toilet, go to the toilet a bit quick. What I'll do is as well, I'll find that stat that I was on about earlier. And also there was actually a Daily Mail article that broke recently, which I'll see if I can find, where it was a person of minority background. The headline was literally, he got a lighter sentence because he was black. So we'll bring those up in a little bit. But yeah, I will be back as soon as possible. Need to go to the toilet a bit quick. Appreciate you being with me, guys. Thank you ever so much. Just check in some of your chats. Quick cuppa. Hope you enjoy it. Bumsy Sock. Enjoy your cuppa. We're the weakest generation in our history. Why are we men and the numbers of football and rugby clubs are coming out? Yeah. I get you. I was reading it as a bit of a joke. That's the way it's being interpreted. I certainly have no end of gripes with people that, you know, care more about football and whatever else than the mainstream political issues of what's going on. Funny seeing Villa fans chanting at the Muslims. Chanting, they laugh. Intentionally, when the people reacted, they got the right police horses, dogs, and Barrions. They literally arrested that dad who tried to save. Yeah, that was something I saw. Yeah, they did try to arrest the dad. The police did now for trying to rescue his daughter from a grooming gang. I covered that on a podcast a good while ago. It was absolutely awful. Speaks to the true degeneracy of the state and the things that they, you know, promote and stuff like that. Just to give you guys the insight into what I was referring to earlier. Appreciate you guys keeping up the chat in there as well. Hopefully having some good discourse that often just benefits everybody, really. This is the thing that was shared by Angloid, he goes by, on X. So this is from in 1968. He alleges, it's just a screenshot, 63% of... this is a different one. This is one that he put up more recently. I thought it was the same one, but it's not. 63% of the British public believed in remigration, supposedly. Britain was 99% white British at this time. Do you think the coloured immigrants who are already here should be encouraged to go home or not? Conservative, slightly higher than Labour in this regard. 63%, maybe it's a standard deviation in brackets, I don't know. It's a bit high for a standard deviation, actually. As you know, or maybe it's a men and women. Maybe it's a men and women distinction. I don't know. 63% and 67% Conservatives, 56% of Labour. And interestingly, at that time, it was more prevalent in the older generations. And the younger generation seem to have a greater bias towards should not. But even then, the majority of people that were polled who were younger generation in this regard, at 54%, said that they should. This is, see if I can find the other one a bit quick. This is not the one that I was looking for exactly. There it is. Survey from 1965. Survey from 1965 he shared. The British public were asked about restricting migration. 90% said yes. So it was actually about 88%. So you had, do you think the government was right or wrong to introduce new measures to restrict immigration? Or all, so Conservatives, Labour and Liberal. This is exactly how I said, 89, 90 and 91. Everybody saying about 88% indeed in favour of restricting immigration, the measures imposed at the time. 89% Conservatives, Labour 90%, and Liberal 91%. That tells you a lot about how things have shifted in the modern day. Now, this is the other thing I was going on. No surprise, this is coming in from Canada. Bear with, I'm just trying to get rid of all of these stupid ads that keep popping up on my screen. Right, let me just... I will get back to your chats as soon as possible, guys. I'm just quickly recropping this because this is relevant. I think it was you, Inquisitor, that put something in the chat. Canadian serial criminal who murdered girlfriend by stabbing her 15 times gets a lighter sentence because he is black, supposedly. A Canadian... I hate these ones as well that cut out... that you scroll down and then they start cutting off the top part of it. It's so annoying. Canadian serial criminal who murdered his girlfriend by stabbing her 15 times in broad daylight was handed a lighter sentence because of his race. Everton Downey, 35, killed his girlfriend Melissa Blimkey, 25, in a savage attack in December 2021 at the Metro Town shopping mall in Burnaby, British Columbia. Downey was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison last month. Prosecutors asked the court to make him ineligible for parole for 15 years, but British Columbia Supreme Court Associate Chief Justice Heather Holmes instead set the period of 12 years. The judge made the decision after reviewing Downey's impact of race and culture assessment. a report used in Canada primarily for black offenders. It explains how poverty and marginalization may have shaped their life. The report noted that Downey did not experience overt racism whilst growing up. However, it later claimed that he experienced disconnection, isolation, and discrimination he had not previously encountered after moving to British Columbia in 2016. Mr. Downey has a substantial criminal record involving violence and firearms. I recognize, however, that the aggravating effect of his criminal record is offset in part by the mitigating circumstance of his background. So the Canadians are the fault as to why he murdered his girlfriend, seemingly. Stabbed her 15 times. It's the Canadian people's and Canadian society's fault. Things will not get better until we start holding individuals guilty for the heinous crimes that they commit and not society. So Canada has increasingly become one of the more, heinously, for lack of a better term, pussified societies who kill more people now via medical assistance in dying than they kill dogs and animals, right? So he seems to have been given not much, admittedly, but 3 years off of his parole period for a heinous murder, and despite his long rap sheet, violence and firearms, simply because of his race. Welcome to Western world in 2026, people. He was described in the assessment as a black man of African, Nova Scotian, African American, and Jamaican ancestry. Can we pick one, please? His report was written by a University of Calgary social worker, Associate Professor Patrina Duhaney, grew up in Toronto in predominantly black and racially diverse neighborhoods and attended racially diverse schools. He felt that he did not experience overt racism and experienced living in communities which normalized racial diversity, shaped his early sense of identity and belonging. Convicted serial killer said that changed when he left his home city for British Columbia. He found a much smaller black population and cultural norms among black communities felt unfamiliar to him. So the cultural norms among black communities felt unfamiliar to him, and that's why the Canadians now have to have this guy potentially coming back out onto the streets in 12 years as opposed to 15, after he heinously murdered his girlfriend. You wonder why people are getting so radicalized as well, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last thing I just want to touch on before we move onto the next thing. You're allowed to like fun things. Yep. Yeah, you are. As long as people are not putting too much, using it as a distraction or worst case, a political thing as well. You know, like, oh, we need this person for the football team. So that means that no end of, I won't use the exact term that the meme uses, but you can find the memes online that say, oh, we know a certain so-and-so murdered and raped your daughter, but we need him for the football team. So can you not say anything? You know, those kinds of memes, right? But yeah, absolutely. You know, one of my, I don't want to say guilty pleasures or whatever, but when I like to from time to time when I am able to get time, is occasionally sit down and play a little bit of video game, right? I like to from time to time when I get time. I don't usually get a lot of time and I'm usually too busy stressing out planning projects and stuff like that. But yeah, I do like to from time to time. Women should not be judges. They feel too much sympathy for criminals. Yeah. Chief Justice Heather Holmes. Yep. Another equity decision gone wrong, for sure. This is the newest one that's really, really worrying with regards to all this. You guys probably would have seen this. You guys know I have a politically active audience for the people that either tune into the show or tune into the live streams. One thing I will ask, guys, obviously I know you guys are pretty good at it as well. If you end up tuning into some of the shows or whatever, please do share them. Can't help but feeling that YouTube especially is doing a good bit of the shadow banning at the moment. An update on one of the previous videos I've done as well about the guy. Do you remember the guy before that went into the lady's home of a blind immunocompromised lady and the daughter had to defend her? That African migrant, I believe it was, a part of the Britannia Hotel that had that really thingy stare, which became a not a meme, but a thing where it would be a lot of thumbnails, mine included. You can find it on my channel. It's like, I think the Britannia situation just got so much worse or whatever it was. He was, the charges against him were dropped today, I believe it was, due to lack of evidence, and the Mail actually censored the previous photos, put a pixelation over him. You can go and find the comments I left under the Daily Mail's post into the relevant article in which I said, I put the photo up of him with that glare and said, this is what the pixelation is hiding. So that's a little bit of update on you from a previous news story as well. And this one as well, really, really terrifying stuff we're getting into now. The plans for migrants to be handed 40% of new homes by 2030. This is terrifying. This is coming up very soon, 3.5 years away. that already now 40% of new homes. We don't have a housing crisis. We have an overpopulation crisis, is what this is saying, right? This is abundantly clear to see now. Conservatives have accused Labour of opening the door without any plan to deal with the consequences. Nearly 4 in 10 new homes built by 2030 will be needed to accommodate migrants arriving in Britain, according to fresh analysis. The data is trending all in the same direction, and the solution, for the most part, again, you can have debates on like how far it goes, right? But there's not really any debate on what the solution is going to be now, and that Britain just has a massive overpopulation problem, and that has been driven 100% by immigration, even more so because the native population has been declining. The native population has been hitting replacement birth rate for a good while. So it's not a case of they're just having too many kids to be able to deal with this. No, we're not having enough, if anything. And as a result, then, this is still going up. This is still massively escalating. It's because of mass migration. Therefore, mass migration needs to be reversed. Not just stopped, but reversed. So the research conducted by the Conservative Party draws on projections by the Home from the Office of Budget Responsibility's latest economic and fiscal outlook. According to the OBR, net migration between 2026 and 2030 is expected to reach almost 1.2. Net migration, mind you. That's including people leaving. Like, as in, you're going to have 1.2 million people coming in, even after you take into account the amount of people that leave. That's insane. Using ONS data of average household size, the Conservatives estimate this would require just under 500,000 additional homes for the new arrivals alone. Who's going to have to fund it? Us. You guys, us. That's going to have to fund it. All the while, you can't even say whatever the hell you want to. Sooner or later, we're not even going to be driving because of the fuel and the road tax and stuff like that. Radicalizing, seeing that the prices on my pumps had gone up about 10 to 20%. I was going to say 10 to 20%. Then 10 to 20 pence per litre, pretty much overnight. Right? That was radicalizing. I remember back when I first got my car, a diesel car, 44 quid would have got me a full tank. Now it'll barely get me from pump 8 to pump 1. You know what I mean? It's absolutely disgusting. And it's gone up about 10 to 20 pence per litre overnight. Britain is projected to deliver about 1.34 million new homes over the same period. All for people who are coming to not only replace you, but take your democratic rights away simply by virtue of them being here, because they will make up the majority vote share. This is literally making you guys, us, right, subsidize our treason. Subsidize the treason against us. And the demographic replacement that comes along with it. This is truly, truly disgusting. So, yeah, you can see why people are getting so radicalized. You can see why people maybe now are not being so nice, right? Maybe you can understand why, because of what they've got coming for them in the near future. Right. Rhiannon's killer. No, not that guy. Not that guy. He didn't kill anybody. It was the guy that went into a woman's residence. If it's the case I'm thinking of, he went into a woman's residence seemingly with the intention of doing really heinous things. He apparently had his hand down his pants, and the young daughter seemingly had to try and defend her mother, grab a chair in the room and drive him out. He was released. The daughter actually got arrested and taken away by the cops outside the Britannia Hotel. You spilled a new Birmingham every year. Yeah, exactly. Empty shitbags, men, boys included. Yep. It's like 500 to 700,000 Brits leave each year. Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, you can understand why. Even if, like many, thinking we need more and more people here than ever before, right? And if you're leaving, there's a certain case to be made of, viewing you with the kind of contempt that you would view a kind of traitor, right? Many people are not in the position where they could leave if they wanted to, right? Via costs and whatever else. So if you are choosing because you're in that position where you can to go and leave, it's understandable, but you can't blame people for thinking that you scumbag, you're leaving us because times are tough. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was the guy that I'll quickly bring it up on screen. I shared the image. I'll quickly bring it up for you now. It's where is it? Here it is. So I put up a post saying media versus reality, because this is the thing. You can see here in this image as one example. I'll just, crop this down. There we are. In this example, you can see that they pixelated the guy. And I know this is the same guy. I know it's the same guy because it's referencing the same situation as is referenced in both of these images. They censored him here because apparently they dropped by police or cleared by police due to lack of evidence. This is how he was looking at the female officer. And that's why I chose that image for my thumbnail, as you can imagine. So yeah, it's not the case of Rhiannon White's killer. Not the same guy. Something like every millionaire that leaves is equal to 40,000 regular taxpayers. He looks psychotic. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. You got it, Bumsy Sock. You know the guy I'm on about. You can go and find the video. It's the best performing video on my YouTube channel, if you want to go and find it. It's one of the ones that, because they seem to be quite topical at the time, it blew up to like 46,000 views. I've never gotten anywhere close to that now. Very rarely do I even get over, 50 views on most videos nowadays, let alone nearly 50,000. So, yeah. You can go and find that. If you go and filter by view count, it'll be the first video that comes up. All right, let's pick up from where we left off.
Our major towns and cities. Should the native people of the country be minorities in their own cities? Is that a problem?
Yeah, I don't think that should be the case. I would agree with you on that.
So if you don't think that should be the case, then what do we do about it? That's
but
the
I don't
question
think that it requires knocking down all the.
Breaking news, guys. Catherine Birbalsingh just come out as an ethno-nationalist. Breaking news. You heard it here first. I'll quickly rewind it a bit quick because I think she's going to go off on a little bit of, again, another slightly irrelevant tangent here.
Then what do we do about it? That's
but
the
I don't
question
think that it requires knocking down all the mosques and the temples.
Can I just ask dig into a little bit about the lawsuit at your school that Connor mentioned? Because is that, or was that, an acknowledgement by you in some way that there are aspects of Islamism that don't fit with day-to-day life in the UK? And I wonder what you think, for example, about...
Not to be too harsh on Dan here, I have a gripe with the Islamism term. I think Islamism is just... There's something wrong with that. There's just something even more wrong with that. Like, I have enough of a gripe with people that use the term Islamism or Islamist, calling them an Islamist. Oh, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Sorry, Dan. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one.
The fact that now we're seeing Premier League football games stopped because of the Ramadan fast being broken. There are now English people who are booing that.
Yes.
And you obviously said no to that in your school.
Yes.
Which suggests that you think it isn't a good part of the culture in some way.
Yes. So I think that there are... Look, the country needs to know what it is, and that's part of that is the biggest bit of the problem, right? I don't think that ethnic minorities are the biggest part of the problem. I think the biggest part of the problem is that Britain doesn't know what it is. And that in the 1980s, it was the case that Britain knew more
what may have happened to disassociate native Brits with their sense of indigeneity and not having that sense of what Britain is and who British people are. What may have happened. Obviously, it's not just one factor. It's not just immigration. It's the education system, as we touched on as well. It's political initiatives saying that everybody can be British and all of these things. But what changed from 1980s to now, eh?
It was. And that over the years, Britain has forgotten that because our teachers, but not just our teachers, everyone has become very ashamed of Britain, both with regard to its colonial past, but also with regard to the way in which the working classes have been treated. There has been an intellectual culture, A.S. Neil and Summerhill School, or you look at Foucault, or you look at John Dewey, American, all of this progressive way of thinking has been pushed onto the people. And again, I would say they haven't asked for that. But the fact of the matter is that the intellectual elites have pushed this progressivism on everyone. And so everyone has ended up thinking things that they never used to think.
Yes.
And so the culture...
They didn't just push progressivism. They didn't just push the progressivism, they pushed the demographic change as well, which has to go hand in hand with that, because it's one thing to celebrate the demographic change. It's another thing then to be part of the political initiatives that push it. You know, it was just a case of pushing the progressivism. It was actively flooding a country to the extent of nearing replacement with foreigners, and not just flooding the country with foreigners as well, but understanding that a lot of these foreigners are very pro procreation, right? Pro replication at a time when British society was deciding that it wanted to eliminate itself anyway.
Culture of the country has changed, and culture matters.
Yeah. But I just...
So with regard to the prayer issue,
yeah,
yes.
because you didn't want the Muslim call to prayer taking place within your school.
But neither did lots of our Muslim families. So you've got one Muslim family.
But should it be allowed
like
out there on the streets, though?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's for the country to decide. At my school, I'm the headmistress, so I did not want that happening. And the reason I didn't want it happening was because it would have divided the children. And I don't believe in dividing children according to race and religion. I mean, there are all kinds of logistical reasons for that, the way in which we do lunch. Again, the vegetarianism, why is that? Because we don't do canteen lunch. We all share the same lunch together. That doesn't happen in other schools. In other schools that are actually liberal, our school is not liberal. What is liberalism? The freedom to just do what you want. You do you. You live your best life and so on. So everyone takes their plate of food, they eat it, they leave it. The cleaners perhaps have to clean up. It's all a bit of a chaos mess in the canteen in most schools. That isn't the case with us. It is very much, we call it family lunch, and we all serve from the same pot of food. And I want the flexibility to be able to move kids around very quickly at the last moment.
It's a weird thing to mention the cleanup, though. Do you not, even if you're doing it in this family style or whatever, presumably you still eat with plates and cutlery. I'm presuming you still have cleaning up and somebody to do the cleaning up, right? Presumably. I don't know. Would you just leave them out there and just reuse them and don't clean them? I'm obviously being a little bit facetious here. No doubt that with the academic credentials that Michaela has, it seems that they have a good system going on. Nobody's debating that, and maybe that could be explored in other schools, even schools that maybe don't have the same demographic problems, because of the point which she did rightly raise, the progressive ideology that's overtaken the school system. So it's just kind of thing there, though. She realized that she said there's like family lunch and we all eat from the same pot of food. But it's like, presumably you still have plates and cutlery which need to be cleaned. So I'd love to see how that differentiates you then from other schools or whatever. Just going through the chat a bit quick. It requires them teaching them to sing God Save the King. Yeah, I know. Christianism thought, I don't know how I feel about that one either. I don't know how I feel about that one either. I like Mohammedans. Yeah, that's an often term that I use, Mohammedan and Mohammedanism. That's one that I often use. I think it's one of the ones that Churchill called them by. I think it's what they were known for a long time, right before the term Islam came about, because they were known as the followers of Muhammad. They would be called Mohammedans, right? Which just makes complete sense. In many ways, they'll often like forgo some of their teachings to follow what Muhammad did, which a lot of times seemingly went against what the actual faith says itself. It's very, very conflicting. The phrase cognitive dissonance in schools. She bans the call to prayer and demolishes the prayer rooms, and the country can't do that because, fair bit of cognitive dissonance observed there. Good stuff. I didn't pick up on that. Good stuff. Appreciate that.
We want the flexibility of kids sitting with each other across races and across religions. Unlike the vast majority of schools, if not all schools that have a lot of Muslim kids that all serve halal food, I did not want to do that. Therefore, I made it vegetarian. In fact, it was an act of resistance rather than capitulation, as you would suggest.
No, I said
Now, the thing is as well, she said that a lot of the Muslim parents were on board with this. I don't know if I 100% buy that. Or maybe, again, they would say that they were on board with it because maybe they're not at a point when they can start enforcing that yet. There's no way they wouldn't start trying to strong-arm her if they were in a point where they had the demographics to do so. So I think that might be a case of I don't know the exact demographics of where Michaela's school is located, right? How much of it is Muslim? How many of the students are Muslim or whatever? No, obviously a lot of them are ethnic minority, but that doesn't mean all of them are Muslim. I can't help but think that maybe it's one of those things again, or they'll go along with it for a certain while. Like they voted Labour for a little while, but then their blocks got large enough to where they voted for one of their own candidates and Labour were left by the wayside. The population, the native populations in those areas haven't been forgotten long before as Labour tried to pander to the Muslim vote. So I can't help but think that there's something else that is likely going on there. I have no evidence, obviously. It's just me reading the situation and trying to call it as I see it, right? I can't but think that maybe there's going to be more resistance than maybe what she's letting on, though.
Compromise, not capitulation.
Right. Well, either way.
I would just ban halal.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you speak as if you're a guy behind a keyboard, not somebody who's actually worked for the state, not somebody who's spent nearly 30 years doing this.
Hold on, Catherine.
Because
there's a reason for that. Do you know why?
Well, I would just ban halal. Well, I'm a headmistress of a school.
I know.
I need to figure out what I'm going to do.
Hold on.
And so
you're saying that I speak like I'm a guy behind the keyboard. Why do you think that is?
Because you're a guy behind the keyboard.
Okay, why do you think that is?
I don't know. You chose to do that as your living.
Yes, because the country has been ruined since before I was born by the same people that we dislike. And so I felt compelled to involve myself in the political process in order to improve it. Why do you think I haven't gotten further than behind the keyboard?
I don't know.
Because even on the ostensible right, there is an insistence to promote minority politicians in order to make the case for integration for the sons and daughters of mass migration, which was voted against. There is still DEI on the right, okay?
One thing is, I don't see how it's an actual criticism a lot of the time saying you speak like somebody that's behind a keyboard. A lot of people just, when it's in the comment section like you guys are now, you're speaking like regular people. You're raising regular points. It's coming across here as though it's kind of likening Connor not to be too belligerent on the point. Almost like you're a simpleton because of how you speak behind a keyboard. You have people speak behind a keyboard when they're writing articles for big newspapers and whatever else. Not exactly a criticism. It's just because it was so simple, and seemingly it's because of the simple solutions that are increasingly finding their way forward that would affect, seemingly, in a lot of people's eyes, people like Catherine and the people of immigrant background that have come over. They have to go down all these different routes of trying to discredit it, even if they have no points, because the simple solutions would affect them, right? That's why you see a lot of people then trying to seemingly overcomplicate it, which is what you seem to be doing at the start of this debate with all the facts that were not really that relevant, in my opinion. So it seems like there's trying to intentional overcomplication because Connor saying here that he would just ban halal, right, and seemingly then enforce that ban, right? It's just a simple and effective solution, right? The simple and effective solutions would seemingly be ones that Catherine and a lot of people would be opposed to because it would affect them.
One political party is launched fairly recently, headed up by Rupert Lowe, and is not engaging in that DEI process. And for simply saying that British identity is derivative of heritage, they have been called Nazis by Reform and The Telegraph. So there is a complete cordon sanitaire.
By brown and black people or by white people? Because the thing is, you keep attacking ethnic minorities.
Both. I don't attack ethnic minorities.
So can we talk about the whites then, please? Because you never mentioned them.
Hang on, no, I actually do. Like, Keir Starmer's a complete traitor, and he might have English heritage, but he's still a traitor, right? That doesn't matter.
Good retort there. Again, she tried to say again, you're not mentioning the white people, you're not mentioning the white people. It's something that people could say about me because of how much I focus on the crimes if they come up in the headlines of people of immigrant background, asylum seekers or whatever. I covered that big case that broke down in Kent. People tried to imply that there was a big grooming gang that broke down in Kent. And without defending them, I articulated it wasn't a grooming gang, it was a series of heinous criminals, right? We have people on the right, they will absolutely share, and when the headlines break of a child, someone that does heinous things to children, I won't say the word for YouTube's sake, who is of native descent ostensibly, you have no end of people calling for the death penalty and all end of things. You have no end of people calling their politicians traitors and whatever else. I was very sad, and will call him a traitor absolutely, for my politician voting to abolish jury trials. My MP voting to abolish jury trials. And my MS saying that communities like mine were built on diversity and immigration. I'm like, no, go fuck yourselves, disgusting traitors. right? But that's one thing. To have people doing that and being traitors and doing horrible things of native background is one thing, and it should get the focus, but it's an entirely different issue when it's coming from foreigners, right, and people of foreign backgrounds, because that's indicative of a much different problem, right? It's indicative of treason, right, when a white politician or a British politician acts in a certain way that is against their people, against their constituents, right, and against what they stand for. It's a completely different thing when you look at the thing where it's a person who's been put into a position of political power that's of foreign descent, that's maybe covering up rape gangs and so on. You can't really, at least in my understanding anyway, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that person really wouldn't be able to commit treason because they're not part of the people. They're a foreigner. You can't really commit treason as a foreigner, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. More than happy to be wrong. Maybe it's a case of they do commit treason because they're part of the British political establishment and therefore they get elected on the basis of representing the British people and their interests, or the interests of Britain at the very least, and as a result if they betray those things that would be constituent to treason. But again, it's not the same. They're not the same, and doesn't mean they need to be, handled the same way. It's like you don't remove entire populations of native British people for say if they were doing the crimes of like the communities of the rape gangs, you chuck all them in prison. But the Pakistanis, you can, the people who knew about it, right? The people that were complicit in it via their silence and via taking the side of their, community rapists over the state and the children and the police forces, right? You can get rid of them because they're not British. Just clinging to all the leftist tropes. I'm just going through the chat a bit quick. It's just another form of typing from your mother's basement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And not everybody's articulate online. I get what she's saying. But again, it's just another case of an insult. Just seems that Connor comes here with like a concerted point, which often he's not allowed to finish. And then it's just a retort mixed with an ad hominem, usually. You know what I mean? You sound naive and should go touch grass, basically. And Connor, in fairness, he's done lots of debates. He's done lots of public speaking. He's done lots of good things, right? He was with the Lotus Eaters for a good while. It was an established organization, right? So yeah, he's saying that he's just implying that he's just like a basement dweller typing behind a phone is not true or whatever. Connor's been up on stage arguing with like all the manner of like the boomers and stuff like that. Been on several different podcasts about like trigonometry. It's not exactly like he hasn't been in the weeds and stuff like that. He's spoken at the Oxford Union, for God's sake. Just clinging to all the leftist tropes. We could do a bingo card, yeah. Quoting sanitaire. How long before she hits him with, you just hate minorities? Maybe we'll see it, who knows. About, have you ever had a girlfriend? Yeah, it's going to think. They try to level these criticisms or whatever else, like Connor and Lewis Brackpool and Charlie Downs at the moment. Be like, all of them are married with a good setup for their life. They're doing extremely well for themselves, and it's great to see. Great role models for young men to follow. Great role models for young men to follow. Be classed as espionage. Yeah, espionage. Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm watching a lot of John Kiriakou at the moment, talking about like him turning people against their own governments via his time in the CIA and stuff like that. They would be committing treason against their own people, but if they're doing it to the American people, like these foreign agents, they're not committing treason. They're committing espionage and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's what I mean. It's not the exact same. It's not the exact same. He is a workhorse in fairness, and yeah, she does. I've seen the most sharp when it comes to this, but I can't help but think like. I don't think she's stupid necessarily, just that I think she's actually trying to like lay these traps and lay these distractions, whether she realizes she's doing it or not.
Okay.
And I mean, it was Nigel Farage himself who was attacking Restore Britain. What's your view of this new political party led by Rupert Lowe?
Well, I have to say, I do think Rupert Lowe's a bit naive. It does sound like he's sitting in the pub and making things up as he sort of goes along. When he says things like parents should be able to take their children out of school whenever they want. Again, I sort of think, have you ever worked for the state? Do you know what it's like running a school? Do you know what that will do to our schools? When he says NHS car parks should all be free, again, I think, have you ever worked for the state? Do you know what it is to run a car park? It's the sort of thing that you say in the pub or you say behind a...
Is it really that intensive to run a car park? I get it. A lot of times you see a lot of car parks nowadays, they have all of the automated infrastructure and you might have people like engineers and whatever else that have a lot of thing over that. But is it really that much work? You don't see a lot of people just walking. You may have like one warden that goes around checking if people are buying tickets and stuff like that. A lot of that's automated nowadays. St. David's car park down in Cardiff is all automated, right? You get a ticket from the you get a ticket from the automated machine as soon as you go in, and you have to pay it before you leave, otherwise you can't leave, right? So it's all automated. You don't even have those people walking around anymore. It's all machines. So that's what I mean. Is it really that thing? And the pub and social places like that, where a lot of great business deals, where a lot of great things get hashed out, a lot of the times because men can just talk like men, right? A lot of times just because men can talk like men. And think about it. If you have a bunch of men around, you don't need a HR department. So pub politics is, people give it a bad rap, you know, again, designed to be demeaning. Is where it comes across as condescending, right? People love the pub culture in the UK, right? All the time now, I don't necessarily have really anybody really to go with. So a lot of the time I end up just sort of, you know, oh, my voice is going. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to subject you to that. You know, all by myself. You know? But that's where I can imagine the kind of conversations that I have had been some of the best conversations ever. You know what I mean? And you'd be surprised the good that can come from a good table and a Wetherspoons, just with a good bunch of your mates and whatever. So again, it's unnecessarily demeaning, and I think it's going to turn a lot of the British people against it, because being like, well, no, we kind of like the pub culture, and there's a lot of good things that can come from it. And like that it's one of the places where you can have a good talk with people and not need a HR department for microaggressions.
Keyboard, instead of actually having had decades of experience of actually running something and doing something and seeing what is required in order to make things work. Sometimes you will have to make compromises.
This falls apart right on the face of it because it's people that have been in their positions for years and decades that have caused these problems. People are sick and tired because it's been generations causing these problems. People Catherine should be thinking that it's people that actually want to make change of the problem, which actually says a lot about seemingly her ideology, right? So it's a case of now people who actually come here threatening to make change, they're discredited, seemingly because these people don't actually want the system to change. And, they don't have the experience or whatever else. Yeah, well, the people with all the experience have destroyed the country. So what does that say about people with experience in this regard, right? It's not like you have an experienced plumber or an experienced landscaper or an experienced plasterer or something like that, where you know that the actual experience credentials are actually going to matter, right? Odds are the more experienced, quote unquote, the politician, the likelier, the seemingly, at least the way it's been in Britain, the worse the society gets, because it's just been measured decline, and seemingly it's the people with the most experience that have been so eager to stab their fellow people, stab their citizens and their fellow countrymen and women in the back time and time and time again.
Sometimes you will end up in court. So you asked me about the mum who took us to court. It was fascinating. You know, I had to have very few conversations with our Muslim families. The fact of the matter is that the vast majority of them, by far, were extremely supportive of the school. One of the Muslim dads wanted to come in and give assemblies to the kids to say to them that he'd grown up in 5 different Islamic countries.
Am I about to be vindicated for what I said earlier, where I said, I think there's a lot more trouble with Muslim families than she's letting on? Am I about to be vindicated? I don't know. She's already hinting here that seemingly, I'm not familiar with this case. If there's anybody that is familiar with this case and what happened, please leave the details in the chat, or please leave like a link to, if anybody wants to go and read it, as to what the actual things were in the chat. If anybody's able to like open up a new tab and go and look at it, please do. I'm a bit strapped for time, so I'm going to press on with this for now. I don't know the exact particulars of this instance, but again, seeing they took it to court, and I'm thinking maybe here that there's actually a lot more problems in the Muslim community than she was letting on.
And that he'd never prayed at school, and that this was totally ridiculous. It was a ridiculous demand, and how dare this family be taking us to court, and how he was hugely supportive of the school. And the fact is that this idea that ethnic minorities are this, and the whites are over here, and the ethnics are here, it's the picture that's being painted that is not accurate.
Okay, but that's not the picture that I'm painting, so you keep mischaracterizing my position. Allow me to ask a question, if I may. Or 2 questions. If Britain were majority Muslim, would it still be Britain?
No.
Okay, right. If Britain were populated up and down the country with schools that practice the Michaela doctrine, I mean, we don't disagree that your curriculum is vastly preferable to the kind of nonsense that that I know Greenwich Council forces its schools to do, for example.
And makes a huge difference to what the kids believe and who they are as people.
Sure.
That's important,
okay,
right?
let's accept that premise.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Let's say the entire country were covered in Michaela schools,
Yep.
but the entire population were Pakistani. Would it still be written?
No.
Okay. So this is the fault line that we are addressing. It is not that the Michaela school is some sort of immoral institution for its curriculum or even its discipline methods, though I don't think I would have gotten on very well with it because I'm very rambunctious, as you can probably tell. It is, do we accept the current pace of demographic change and thereby cultural change that organically results, or do we stop it and reverse it? And the people against stopping it and reversing it, including Reform UK, including the Conservatives, including Robert Toombs, use your school as an example for why we have this as a sort of strategy so that we don't need to resort to stopping and reversing it. Because, let's put it this way, why would demographic change be a problem if, using the Michaela curriculum, everyone could learn to be English? Because you acknowledge demographic change comes.
Well, as I've said to you, I've already acknowledged that I think
exactly.
demographic change cannot move at the speed that it is going, and also at the numbers.
Yes.
I think that immigration works successfully when it's in smaller numbers and when the country knows what it is. The fact is that Britain doesn't currently know, and that is a problem. And I would lay fault with the
Michaela's
liberals,
school
the
as a
liberalism that you talk about.
microcosm.
Yes.
For that,
Exactly. So there we go.
What would you
There is
say?
strength at
So
Michaela.
what? Yeah, exactly.
I
And so
embody
what-
that strength.
And sum it up.
Okay.
What?
Just before Dan finishes, for those of you who may just want a little bit of extra context as to what it would mean if it was a microcosm, at least according, this is just Google AI, a brief Google search, so it could be wrong, right? Take this into account, it could be wrong. Again, boasting some of the highest progress in England in 2022 to 2024. Just make sure that my mic's coming through a moment. It is. If you type in Michaela School UK demographics and just expand it on the AI bit, it will come up and it will highlight for you that it has about 744 students, 98.8 ethnic minority intake. 98.8. I thought it was around 80%, like 85%. According to Google, at the very least, 98.8%. Apparently, about 72% of them have English as a second language. So you can see how having this as a microcosm of, I think I paused this at the perfect time. I just realized I think I paused this at the perfect time. I'm sorry, Catherine. I didn't mean to do this. Would that, if that was a microcosm of British society, would we not say that is a problem? Even if they're all great people, that would be the very thing that people are rallying against. That would be the ethnic destruction of the British people, the ethnocide of the British people. 1.2% in their homeland? Come on, come off it. The lawsuit brought by a Muslim pupil challenged the school's policy on grounds that it would be discriminatory, breach religious freedom, and made religious minorities feel alienated. There we go. So it was exactly, presumably that was to do with like either banning the call to prayer or banning prayer or whatever it was, presumably. Finally spelled it out for her, yeah. Will she understand? I don't know, it's a question, will she understand? I think it's a case of maybe will she accept? I think it's a case of, at the moment, it's a case of people being unwilling to accept reality because of how uncomfortable it is. And I understand that. I empathize with everybody wherever they may be caught in this. My chief source of empathy is for the native British people that are facing demographic replacement and minoritization, right? I also empathize with people that have been sold this lie, that have come here from different backgrounds and been sold this lie, right? People I really don't empathize with are the traitors in government. All right. And the foreign actors that have been actively pushing the restriction of the freedoms of the British people and furthering foreign agendas, right? Pretty much all of my ill will, in terms of, people whom I'd like to see in like The Hague, so to speak, for, a lot of the traitors and the foreign agents in Westminster and in all of our establishments, political establishments, like the Senate and so on, right? Just people, because of either ethnic grievances or religious grievances or both, would wish to do us harm. And that's why, ultimately, because this was something that was never consented to, it was never given permission, it needs to be reversed. It's an uncomfortable reality, but reality is often uncomfortable. It's just unfortunately the way it is. So this is a grown judge jury stuff a wee bit more constructive. I know you can. 82% of the people living where her school is are foreign nationals. Appreciate that, Kim. Thank you ever so much. So yeah, I understand Google could be a little bit inaccurate on times. That's why English isn't their first language. That explains a lot. Thank you ever so much.
So we know very much what are we?
Represent
so
as
this
a
is where I say
microcosm of
about
the country.
the values that basically have their heritage in Christianity, although we are a secular school, but we believe in children being responsible for themselves. If they don't bring in their homework, they're responsible for that. It's not somebody else's fault. They have a duty towards other people. If you get a detention, you don't just let yourself down, you let all the children in your class down, you let your form tutor down, you let your head of year down and your parents down. We believe in service to the community, to the country. So the 11th of November is a massive thing for us. In many schools, they don't even bother doing the poppies. All of our children will be wearing poppies. All of us do our 2-minute silence. That week we do assemblies, all about how grateful we should be to those young men who gave their lives, and how lucky we are to be in this country. And so there is a gratitude and a respect for the country that all of us have, that I would say many young people do not have now, whatever their race, whatever their religion. The reason why you are finding it such a struggle generally in trying to say some of the things that you want to say in the country is because so many people, whatever their race, whatever their religion, feel they carry this sort of white guilt. They've been taught a history of their country, which is perhaps not accurate. They've been taught to feel ashamed of their country, and those stats that I just told you about teachers and how things moved from 80% young people feeling proud of the country in 2004 to in 2024, that being reduced to 40%. There's a reason for that. And what I think you miss out on is the fact that, yes, mass migration has happened more recently. Yes, I agree with you that the scale and the speed is too much. But that overlaps with the exact time that teachers, schools, and the entire country have become so ashamed of themselves. And so you are experiencing not only the results of mass migration, you are experiencing the results of a country that has been apologizing for itself, both through its school system, through its media, and through just through everything. And culture is just...
Yeah, well, one directly leads on to the other as well. This is the only thing, because obviously if you have more and more of these people coming in that are able to operate on those systems of racial grievances and historical grievances and so on, if the British public, the British people, refuse to go along with it, well, they go thrown in prison or they'll have their character assassinated. In many instances, once your character is assassinated, there's a good chance that if you have a certain amount of the political presence, but even not, you see that a lot of the Muslims are threatening the families of rape gang victims and stuff like that. It could be your life on the line. So that's the thing. This has brought very real mortal consequences for the British people, this multicultural experiment. And until, you have people here that are the beneficiaries of that system, like the ethnic minorities and everything like that in Michaela's school, everything like that, are the beneficiaries of that system. All of these people that have now been able to get their own representatives elected to government, whether it's Pakistani, whether it's Hindi or whatever else, right? They're all beneficiaries of that system. They're all beneficiaries of that self-flagellation, but the self-flagellation has been enforced by the state for generations. So it's all well and good to say that, oh yeah, well, this change has occurred in conjunction with this, But it's a positive feedback loop, and they're not independent variables. They're dependent on each other, because the more of these ethnic minority, the more of these immigrant background come in, the more it's going to reinforce the self-flagellation, which reinforces more of these people coming in, because it's a weak society and it's able to be taken over, and it reinforces more self-flagellation. So it's this positive feedback loop and this cycle that's going to keep going, and it's ultimately then just going to be the case of putting an entire stop to it and reversing it. Someone screaming, "Don't hurt him," as we wrestle a rapist to the floor. I see no end of videos of people, particularly women, getting involved when it's two men going off, usually someone of migrant background, and somebody who seems to be in European countries at the very least, somebody of native background. There was a video of somebody squaring off with what appeared to be some African migrant earlier, and they were fighting, and the guy's wife or partner, whoever it was holding his hands behind his back, like trying to get him to like stop, and was literally basically giving the other attacker, the other guy, almost like a free hit. You know what I mean? It's like, no. Just like, they got to stay out of it. Yeah, she's talking about due process, etc. He's passed by in our country. Our teachers are having to deal with 360 different languages in London. Education of our children has suffered due to it. Yeah, exactly. It's all melded together, right? They want to say that America is like a melting pot and whatever. This melting pot that has been created in Britain has spelled nothing but, degradation and a lack of hope for many people. And ultimately, it's just going to need to be resolved, right? Imagine the chaos in those classrooms where they speak 30 different languages. I know. And that's where it's impossible for the teachers then as well. You know what I mean?
Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Culture is everything. And which is why I firmly believe that if you were to bring up a black child as well as...
Isn't culture in a way going to inform the strategies? If you have a culture that venerates dying in the pursuit of a cause, isn't that going to then inform the strategies, such as going in and blowing yourself up somewhere? And I know what she means by this point. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You have... If a culture is like a colonizing imperialistic culture, you're just going to have strategies that come along with that. It's just going to be a case of how, individuals plan to execute the bidding of like their political leaders or whatever. You don't, like in Japan, you had the kamikaze planes, whatever else, right? You have suicide bombers in other cultures. In some other cultures, you just have... depending on what technology they have, you have them opting for like bayonet charges and cavalry and whatever else. It's the culture that you're in that informs those strategies. It's not that it eats it for breakfast. It's going to be the culture that you're raised in. If you're raised in a culture where it says we love death more than you love life, is it really a surprise when they go into somewhere and blow themselves up, or they are not afraid to go down with the bomb that they've created or whatever? Is it really a surprise? Imagine a school is a lot more structured than those schools where they don't give a shit. Yeah, exactly. That's what I think. Yeah, there's no doubt in the academic credentials of the school, absolutely. But it's just a case of what it represents is exactly what the British people don't want.
Your own biological white child, that those children would be indistinguishable, because her being black makes no difference.
Well, it wouldn't be indistinguishable. And again, it's not her being black. It's that she does have Nigerian heritage versus someone having English heritage.
But what does that mean?
Okay, there's a couple of things. First of all, unfortunate reality among Afro-Caribbean populations, there is a much higher rate, for example, of psychosis. So that leads to, sort of attacks that we saw on the Huntington train stabbing, or with Valdo Calacane, or something like that.
So you're going to use these few exceptional examples.
But the thing is, as well, it just means that you're not going to find. You go back to like a couple 100 years or whatever. You go back to the time of England's rebellion. You're going to see a much different demographic situation as to what you find in the UK nowadays, because it was Welsh people, not Nigerians. That's just the you're not gonna, like, they tried to put across this propagandized image of the black pagans with like the blue Celtic paint or whatever it was, right, with the traditional Celtic markers or whatever. It's not. It's not a thing. So that's what heritage means, right? So people have different heritages from different places. They should be proud of those things, right? But the British people, the peoples that make up the British people, right? The indigenous ethnic groups have their own heritage, and that's distinct from other places in the world. That's the reality, right?
examples to say
I'm not
that the
using
girl
it-
that you would
I'm
bring
not-
up
no.
would not be just like her sister?
No, I'm not. I'm not using it to say this hypothetical girl. I'm saying this is why populations with different heritage are different. It stops them from being indistinguishable. You use the word indistinguishable.
Those two girls, yes, I think
No.
they would be
Oh,
indistinguishable.
okay, but
apart
we're
from
talking
the
about-
way they look.
Yeah, but
in
we're not.
terms
We're
of
not
their
talking
skin
about.
colour.
We're not talking about my hypothetical adopted family because we're not talking about a hypothetical here. We are talking about an experiment that has already been run, and we're seeing the dividends paid. Right? We're already seeing the I think organic division, unfortunately, along ethnic and sectarian lines. I don't think the Gorton and Denton by-election, for example, where the Green Party successfully galvanized the Muslim community, was because the Green Party artificially injected division into the community. I think they capitalized.
Keyword organic. Keyword organic. I just wanted to pause it a bit quick to catch up with your chat. There's a lot of activity going in the chat. Greatly appreciate you guys. Which means you can't impose a new structure over a culture that won't accept it. Oh, okay, fair enough. Maybe I'm doing a little bit of misreading here, like the stop smoking campaigns. Okay, I can understand that. That's the way it's being represented. Fair enough. Maybe I'm misreading it. You know, Slims. She's very strict. She rules with discipline that other schools lack. She does get the best result. Yeah, discipline is great. Discipline is great. It's one of the things that, you know, if you exercise any kind of discipline towards a child nowadays, a good chance that the teacher's going to get hauled in front of a tribunal for some kind of conduct if the parent complains, right? If you can complain about little Jimmy who's the gold star of the class, even though he's going around punching everybody in the back of the head or whatever, it's the discipline is definitely needed. They need that structure implemented, especially when they're very young. In many instances, to keep them going off down bad paths as well, right? There's a few examples that are founded on the stats he just gave. Yep, exactly. I've seen her before. I think her school is great, just bizarre how she can't apply the same concept to our nation. Yeah, exactly. It's like she almost doesn't, she either can't, won't, or, either can't or won't realize what Michaela School represents, and that if that was applied to the entire nation, what that would entail.
On existing ethnic and sectarian loyalties in the community and just said, hey, we're the party for Muslims who are going to steal white people's stuff. Why don't you vote for us? So I think if you have this mass demographic change, you organically get these ethnic sectarian divisions, because the reason the countries are the way they are, of the people that came from that to here, are because in sufficient enough numbers, they act like that country. So it doesn't, I think it doesn't, it's not the Michaela School's strategy is itself bad. It is that, not only do I think it will not work at scale with the demographic situation we have at the moment, but it is being used. And you said, this is why you have so much difficulty saying the things you say. I don't have a problem saying it to left-wingers at all. I'm always happy to debate them and eviscerate them. The problem we have actually is getting a hearing on our own side. And that's because the people who are in institutions, like Freddie says Unheard that cancelled our debate previously, like the Spectator, like respective political parties, is because they are inhabited by people that you say have experience, but I say wreck the country, who have the philosophy that, well, yeah, mass immigration has happened. Yeah, we did it against public consent. But actually, we don't need to stop it. We don't need to reverse it, because we have the model of integration embodied in the Michaela School. So it's okay. We're just going to integrate everybody. And it's not going to work. And acknowledging it's not going to work then leads to a completely different way of doing politics, that all of the respective political parties poised to take power, and all of the people controlling institutions, which have rendered me just an ignorant young man on his keyboard, it leads to them either reassessing their priors or needing to get out of the way.
I think you give us far too much credit. I don't think that every politician in Britain is making the decisions they're making because of the Michaela School. I mean,
Prominent
ridiculous.
ones are verbally citing it.
Yes, they might be saying Michaela is this lovely school. I mean, Suella Bra.
If you think that's an example of what Michaela is, again, it's reinforcing the point that I'm making here, is that's what Michaela represents, that many people in Britain are opposed to. A lot of the initiatives that have been pushed in Britain, pushed by organisations like George Soros Open Society, I think it's the Open Society Foundation. There was an article that broke recently. I haven't read it yet. I was going to cover it on the show about how embedded big organisations and individuals like George Soros are in these initiatives, and obviously with the training that they provide, you have people like Zoe Gardner, I believe it is, or I believe she goes by Zoe Jardinier on X, the actual handle itself. You have Femi, who's another one that's been through the system, right, been trained to regurgitate these lines and put out these pieces, these globalist pieces, right? So it's not a case of everyone's just looking at Michaela's school and being like, oh, that's the thing that is informing everything, and giving credit in that way. No, credit where credit's due for the academic success and things like that. But it's that it's a representative of where Britain is going and what people are actively opposed to, right? The increased, in many instances now, coming back to it, right, along with the nationalism, the increased rejection of things like secularism and things like that, and the demographic situation which is present in Michaela, which would, if you extrapolated it out again to the demographic situation of the UK, would result in, for lack of a better term, a complete ethnocide. You know what I mean? So that's where she seems to be thinking there, that she's it highlights to me she's taking everything very personally, which is a big thing as well, that this is not necessarily personal, this is political, right? Tit whisper. Children respect discipline, makes them feel safe, and love means parents are paying attention. Yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure. It's good to have to like set up a routine and stuff like that as well. Yeah, you know, obviously I'm not a parent, so I won't speak, you know, too much on this, and won't attempt to armchair general on this. But, you know, children without that kind of discipline, and if they're just completely left to their own, you know, devices and whatever, because they don't simply have that life experience yet. There's you know, no end of bad things that can happen, but experimentation for them in some ways isn't necessarily bad as well. If you come home and you find out they've taken the radio or taken something apart to find out how it works, right, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Which means they're trying to figure out how the world works, right? So dads are needed, discipline of which culture. Yeah, good. Yeah, dads especially, good dads as well. Obviously, a bad dad can be very, very destructive. A good dad is absolutely needed, and it's one of the things as well that will be a massive deterrent for child predators. In a lot of the things that I've read as well, is that they look for a family structure in which the dad is present and strong and a threat. If they don't see that, it might be a good indication that they can go after the child, especially for boys. Yes, absolutely, because they're going to have that thing where eventually they work out the hierarchical structure with the dad. Eventually they're going to have that thing where they have that experience of actually realizing that moment where they're stronger than the dad, right? And that's a formative moment for a young man, right? That's a moment of not only a moment where they realize their strength, but they realize the responsibility that they have. That they don't have that guiding voice which they need all the way through their childhood as well, and through their development, through their adolescence. Someone as well to keep them in check. Right? Think about it. When a boy hits puberty and they're able to eventually get stronger than their mother, right? They essentially have the dad is the force that keeps them in check. If they wanted to enact their own, you know, regime, so to speak, the mother in some ways would have no real way to really do anything about it from a force perspective, right? So you need that dad around. The lack of dads have been very, very destructive in like the black community in America, for example. The single motherhood rates over there have been, you know, truly, you know, destructive for those communities, and it's sad to see. Still not stronger than my dad. He's a freaking tank. Okay, maybe not all of us will get that. I'm very sad, right? This is a tidbit about not my family or whatever. Everyone say anything about them. I'm the tallest out of my mom and dad. So the sad thing is I'm about 5'7", and I know I'm not going to get any taller, and all I wanted in life was to be able to put 6 on my height form. That's all I ever wanted, to start off with 6. And I'm not going to get there short of putting on friggin' stilettos, right? It's terribly sad. But yeah, it's not exactly, you know, I'm not like massive tank guy by any means. That he's like in his 70s now, quite heavily immunocompromised. So yeah, it's like whatever. If I want to do whatever I say is going to go, but I respect him. He worked all his life. He's a workhorse all his life. Nothing but love for my dad. But yeah, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. It's usually you had that moment where you end up realizing that you're kind of a little bit stronger than your parents, but that also carries that responsibility as well. Michaela School has proper British values, if that's what you mean. Or we've drawn the wrong prophet. Mother only had to give me one of the looks and I'd run. Yeah, for sure. For sure. We're all terrified of our mothers. I still am, to a lesser extent, sometimes, right? You know, but that's the thing. We need that. Kids need that. They need consequence, right? They need consequence as well. But knowing that it's coming from a loving place, not because they want it to be, too overbearing and authoritarian and bordering on the abusive. By the way, it's just strict 12. Happy Mother's Day to any mothers out there. Look forward to seeing mine a little bit later. And those who may not be with us, hopefully, however you will hopefully be celebrating this Mother's Day, I hope you have a fantastic day. Every single one of you. There's not too long of this left of this video. We'll get onto it now. Just checking the chat a bit quick. Where is it? There we go. Special voice. There we go. My dad was the big softie. Stability more than anything. Absolutely. And orientation. They need that role model to look up to, both in terms of both parents, right? In terms of both parents. So yeah, they're meant to be the role models. I think that's why in the scriptures it will say as well, honor thy father and mother, right? It's for that reason. So that reason, because we're going to become them eventually, right? If we're not already.
Government has been put in charge of education. Of course she's going to talk about Michaela. I mean, they're not going around, these politicians have not made their decisions on what they should do with immigration because of Michaela. I mean, we're just one little school. I mean, this is ridiculous. Look, the fact is 1 out of every 5 people in England are ethnic minority. Those children are going to school. We've got to think about...
I think that is massively off, because I think it's closer to about 60 to 65%, which would be closer to 2 in 5. So I don't think that's accurate when she's saying here that 1 in 5 are ethnic minority or whatever. I think it's massively, massively more than that. Even in areas like Cardiff, where that would be the case, certainly walking around some areas like I did when I was down in Public Child Protection Wales for their demo. I parked about 30 odd minutes walk away from the event, and walking through some places, I won't go into too much detail, but there were times when, especially with the equipment that I was carrying as well, did not like some certain circumstances. So I think it's even worse in England. You look at areas like London, it's been completely ethnically replaced, essentially.
About what we're doing. Now, I am an expert at being a headmistress. I'm not an expert on immigration, but I do agree with you that speed and scale matter. To be honest, I don't even know what the specific positions are of the various different politicians that you're talking about. Obviously, you disagree with them, but that's sort of none of my, I'm not part of that discussion. I mean, I'm just saying
I know you're not.
Schools should be more like Michaela. Why wouldn't we want schools to be more like Michaela? Because for all of those ethnic minorities in the country and all of those white kids in the country, it's important that we teach them to be patriotic and to put the country first.
Allow me to give an illustrative example. So,
final word, Connor.
Okay. John Gray wrote for the New Statesman. John Gray is a liberal in the way that you would recognize the term liberal being used. And he said, in future, we have 2 choices. We can either go down the route of sectarian division and elect someone like Reform UK, and he thinks that they're way too harsh for him. I think that they're still liberal pluralists. Or we can create a British identity that includes everyone. We can be liberal and pluralist. And in order to do that, we have to be muscular in our liberalism. So we need metal detectors outside of Westminster Cathedral, for example, which weren't needed for the 1,000 years it existed. We need to be more punishing of people who disparage different groups. So we need tighter restrictions on speech. So it's either you go down the route of exclusion or you go down the route of essentially creating a state that looks like the Michaela School because they believe it's a successful example of integration. I'm saying I don't think it will work at scale, and it's also not desirable because actually I don't want my identity that I've inherited redefined to encompass lots of people who do not live the same way and do not believe things that I believe, who were not invited here in the first place to stay. And so the alternative to this is just to say we should be quite chauvinistic about our own culture, and we should say it's not compatible with Islam or Sikhism or Hinduism or the tribal subcultures of the Indian subcontinent. And so if you want that, you should leave.
Well, absolutely fascinating. I am so delighted we had this discussion, which was censored by the Spectator. I have been fascinated. I think you're both patriotic people coming from different points of view, and it was absolutely brilliant to hear Connor Tomlinson, the host of Tomlinson Talks on YouTube and Substack. and Catherine Birbalsingh, the strictest headmistress in Britain who runs the Michaela School. Thank you so much for recreating that debate. Okay, we are moving over to Substack now. Royal Uncancelled After Show. So,
sorry, guys. So that was the full debate. That was the ending remarks. So I think that Connor as well, because I think he sort of has some differences of opinions with a lot of people on the right, on a lot of people on the nationalist spectrum with regards to maybe how far things like the reversal of immigration goes and stuff like that. I think that's where you can sort of have the debate, right? Maybe how far does it go? But already by having that debate, you acknowledge the source of the problem. It still seems as though people are wrestling with acknowledging the source of the problem. So it's very, very insightful, has to be said. I think that there's a fair few things that could have been done better. The first sort of 30 minutes or so, up until the point where Catherine eventually asked Connor what his position was, just seems as though there wasn't really too much substantive to talk about because it wasn't about the actual issues themselves. So that maybe could have been done, a little bit better. Maybe a little bit more work, because you never heard from Dan. That's the thing. You never heard essentially from Dan. You only heard from Dan very, very rarely. I think there maybe could have been a couple of times because Connor was getting interrupted quite frequently, especially towards like the start and the middle. Maybe just interject and say, sorry, Catherine, could you let Connor just finish this point a moment, please? And then you'll have your time, right? Just in certain instances, because I understand the debate, there needs to be some times where, you need to have that back and forth, need to just have that outright disagreement, almost like that actual bit of verbal conflict, to sort of, establish who's going to take control in that instance, right? In some instances, because Connor seemingly was so polite, right? You had, you had instances where he would go to finish a point and then it would be an interjection and seemingly he would never actually get the chance to finish it. So maybe I wish there was a little bit more involvement from Dan on there. But again, I've never moderated a debate. It's very easy for me to say, right? I don't know if Dan's ever moderated debates before. I think that could have maybe helped it flow a little bit better, maybe as well, being more cognizant of maybe keeping it on topic as well. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good conversation. I'll take away, and I appreciate you guys here being in the chat with me as well. Just quickly check out some of these comments on here. I do apologize, guys. I'm trying to check them, but it keeps refreshing every time a new message comes in. Let's have a look. So, where is it? Okay, 1/5 to 20%. England is like 60 to 70%. So yeah, so it's a bit more than 1/5. It's more like 2/5, if anything. Which again, you only need to get to 2.5/5, and that's the minority point, right? That's how close it is. Last 5 million years, right? 50% Muslim demographic in her school. Apparently, London is now down to 33%. I saw Charlie Kirk in an interview with Tucker Carlson not long before he died say that it was 21%. So I don't actually know. There's a little bit of inaccuracy and error in the measurement and stuff like that. So yeah, either way, it's a massive minority area. It's been, for lack of a better term, colonized. So you see that's why you have these bollards up everywhere. The fruits of this muscular liberalism are all over the place in our big cities. The diversity barriers and all things like that. So the question is, do we want more of that? I think most people would say probably not. Most people would say probably not. Bollards of peace. I'm going to start calling them that. Bollards of peace. Yeah. Need armed guards at Jewish schools. Yeah, and the biggest thing is with that at the moment is that you see a lot of these, a lot of Jewish figures, or at least a lot of talking heads, like the European president of the European Conference of Rabbis, saying they need to ally with the Muslims, even though they're planning on bringing seemingly more Muslims in. Itmar Ben-Gvir and the heads of the more right-wing factions in Israel saying we want more Mohammed, in Europe and in Britain in particular. So, it's no surprise then when you have this kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden a synagogue in Manchester gets attacked. There's an attack at a Jewish school, or whatever. I'm not blaming them just for that, because our government could always say, no, send them away, right? So it's not just that, but yeah, it's terrifying to see, especially when it's a school. Regardless of what school it is, you never want to see these things happen, right? It's a tragedy wherever the hell it happens when it comes to children, right? When it's a trans-identifying shooter out in America, right? There's a trans-identifying shooter out in America, going in, shooting up a Catholic church and school proceeding, right? Like that happened several times last year. Whether it's anywhere really, the Jewish incidents at synagogues and schools, etc. Yeah, it's absolutely tragic. Yet those same people a lot of the times are hesitant to the same solutions. It's really, really confusing a lot of the time. No worries, Bumsy. Thank you ever so much. Greatly appreciate you. Connor has done his own review of his discussion to explain all that. I might watch that in my spare time. Might not stream now, but I might watch that one in my spare time. Be good to get a lot of his maybe clarification, because again, when you're sat in front of things like this, there's nobody to interrupt you. You can just give a bit of a stream of consciousness. So it'd be good to see that. Connor, I think, is a very eloquent, a very well educated and experienced guy. So yeah. I think he'd be a great guy to sort of get that extra perspective from. It's a half reference to America, where most Jewish schools have armed guards because they live side by side with people who hate them. Yeah. You can understand why. It's even in London as well. I think they have their own police force, don't they? Or at least they have their own branch of the police force. It's there's a lot of things people say about that. Why they have their own police force and stuff like that. But again, you've seen as well that, in fairness, in their own interests, they can't rely on the police in many instances, right? You've got groups in this country that will literally go out hunting for Jews, and the police seemingly won't do anything. Agreed, though. With the amount of people that we live here and hate us, we should have armed guards too. Yeah, exactly. And that's why the notion of Restore Britain, pushing the ability for people to carry pepper spray, is hopefully going to pave the way for a Second Amendment equivalent in the UK. Hopefully, again, we need to reassess our fundamental morals and stuff like that in a society before we have that. There's a reason why in the US Constitution it says that it's for a righteous and religious people, it's wholly inadequate for the prescription of any other people, right? Remember that psycho in the Netherlands that went into a nursery and started I didn't see that. No, dressed the Joker. I didn't see that. No, but again, you only got to look at Southport, right? Yeah, like a Southport, right? We don't have a choice. We have the equivalent. We have to have the equivalent of how Israel run things. In Israel, young IDF are everywhere. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people now saying, essentially with Israel and their essential ethno-nationalism, which is what Zionism is essentially, said, well, all we want is that for Britain. All right. And then you see a lot of these people that are staunch Zionists will then be very against that, it seems. So it's very, very confusing, where a lot of people sort of twisting and turning, allegiances lie and whatever else. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's where, again, you're seeing now how the necessity for survival will influence certain things in the way people conduct themselves, right? So again, the fact of the matter is the British people have not realized how much their need for survival has been suppressed, and they don't realize the problem that they're in. I think as soon as people en masse realize that, things would change very, very quickly. You know what I mean? The Pakistanis. There we are. Let's go before these foreigners started. I'm wondering if not he was the beginning. So yeah, especially regards to Israel, for all these people say about them, and I've had my discussions on that, a few points that have slightly changed here and there from time to time, that especially things that are being done recently, I'm very, very skeptical of. But certain things we can learn, and the way they do things, and that how much the necessity for survival is something that should always be cognizant of people's minds. The Horseman had Sharia patrol armor. I saw that. Yeah, I saw those videos. That's the way it's going. People need to wake up and realize that's the way it's going. Even if it's just in England at the moment, even if it's just in the big cities, it's going to come for us all eventually. People in areas like mine where haven't been in any way the same affected yet, but I am eagerly awaiting the next census because of anecdotally how much I've seen my community and communities like mine changing. I think the census is massively outdated. You know what I mean? But yeah, awesome. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Right, teeth in. Greatly appreciate you all being here. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. And hope we'll do this again in the near future. And yeah, we would absolutely get locked up if we started patrols. So yeah, I'm gonna call it there for this evening. But I thank you so much for joining me. I hope that I said you enjoyed it and got value out of this video. If you're watching this back a little bit later, hope that you enjoyed it and got some value out of it, obviously. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all so much for your comments. Thank you all so much for engaging with me. Questions, whatever it may be, or your comments in the chat, etc. Like and subscribe if you want to support the show. There'll be links down below. And yeah, thank you all so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to everybody that's a member of the show as well, whether you be a free member in either Locals or Patreon, or obviously a paid member as well. I greatly appreciate you all. Take care all, and I will catch up with you very, very soon. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hoi fawr to see you next time. You take very good care of yourselves now, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Mother's Day. Godspeed.